All right. Excuse me. Let's get it. Drive time. Monday afternoon. We are looking at about 7 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock. Really hot weekend, but it's settled a little bit to start the week. It's about 76 degrees and sunny. It's a beautiful day here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. Porter Larson behind the glass today. Producing the program, booking the program. We have a lot to do on this Monday afternoon. When we said goodbye to you on Friday afternoon, we wondered if we'd be previewing a Game 7 in the Eastern Conference playoffs tonight in New York at Madison Square Garden, but MSG will be dark tonight. I don't know, maybe they have a concert, no basketball. As the Indiana Pacers got it done, man, it's an impressive group led by their head coach, Rick Carlisle, who's a Hall of Famer. And after taking Dallas to the championship in 2011, it was a really weird Mavericks team. Dirk was peak Dirk, but they were able to win a championship that not a lot of people saw coming. And if you look at the odds for Indiana to be in the NBA Finals, it was 29-1. 29-1 to start the playoffs. They started the season 10-15. And now they're going to the finals, and I think they're going to get smoked. We'll talk about it as OKC has been waiting. So we'll get into NBA playoff basketball. We'll preview the NBA Finals. We'll also preview the Stanley Cup Finals. Can Edmonton be the first Canadian hockey club to win Lord Stanley's Cup in 32 years? It is a rematch of the Stanley Cup Final from a year ago, where Florida won 3 games and Edmonton won 3 games, and Florida got it done in Game 7. So we'll talk some Stanley Cup Finals and some NBA Finals. Both of those, by the way, series can be heard here on ESPN 700. So kind of keep that in mind. We're home of the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals. Hockey gets going on Wednesday, and then basketball gets going on Thursday. We have turned our calendars to June. It's important around here because that means it is the NBA draft and the NHL draft coming up in just a few weeks. We'll have great coverage for you. Draft night here on the station. We'll do a show comprehensively covering the first round. Then the second round, ironically enough, will be taking place during our show the next day. So we'll be able to react to that in real time. The Utah Jazz made a surprise hire today. Nobody saw this coming. Austin Ainge has been hired as the Utah Jazz president of basketball operations. Of course, Austin is Danny's son. Austin worked for Danny in Boston. He was hired to be the G League head coach, did some scouting, and he has spent a total of 17 years working for the Celtics. Justin Zanuck remains in his role as the general manager. Austin is going to address the media in about an hour from right now. We're going to replay those comments for you coming up in the 4 o'clock hour. So what does this mean for the front office structure? We'll get into it a little bit. I've known Austin a long time. I've known the Ainge family a long time. So we'll kind of get into this. And what does this mean about the role of his dad? And how will it work with he and Justin Zanuck day to day? So we'll get into that story on the program today. RSL maybe we should just start giving our guy CK credit because he seems to call these things pretty early. He said it feels like a lost year. Probably is. The Galaxy had not won a game all year, and then RSL rolls in and they smoke them. 2-0, a bit of a break for the soccer club and badly needed because they're really bad. It's not even fun to watch right now. So we'll do a little soccer on the show today, too, of course, of local interest. Major League Baseball is kind of moving into the consciousness now. And Big 12 meetings took place over the weekend in Orlando. So a lot of things to get to, including the potential expansion of not just the CFP, but how about the NCAA basketball tournament? Charlie Baker with some interesting comments in that direction. So we'll get to some off-season college football stuff. NFL, should time allow. We've got a good college football guest on the show as well. So a lot to do on a Monday afternoon. Kyle Bonagura will start things off from ESPN. Kyle wrote a piece for ESPN.com 2 weeks ago after the civil suit was filed against Jake Retzlaff. No up-to-date information regarding anything there. If anything, of course, drops while we're on air, we'll bring it to you. So we'll talk to Kyle about the Retzlaff stuff, and we'll talk to Kyle about the expansion of the CFP, Big 12 storylines and such. Tom Haberstroh, NBA Daily Assist style. On a Monday afternoon, we'll bring in Tom to preview the NBA Finals. We'll do some drafts, some Jazz off-season. Richard Smith, how about Smitty, live in studio for an entire hour today, starting at 3:30 And then we will bring you the Austin Ainge press conference after Smitty bounces in studio, and we'll go from there on a Monday afternoon. Happy Monday to you. Hope you had a great weekend. The weather was beautiful. It was hot, but it was fun. Hopefully you got outside. Kyle Bonagura, Tom Haberstroh, Richard Smith, Austin Ainge press conference. Me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. Oh, Porter, I give you so much credit for your optimism on Friday. When I asked you, are we going to do you have sunglasses on in the studio? What are you doing?
It's bright in here. You have to have the shades up. So
I like natural light. Do I have to remind you the Larry David line on people that wear sunglasses inside? There are only two types of people that wear sunglasses inside, Porter.
Can you say it on the radio, I think?
Blind people and a-holes.
Oh, that's right.
I can't say the whole thing, but you can say that.
I'm not blind. I am a little light sensitive. I have a lot of concussions.
Okay.
I get like a little shaky when I get like stressed out usually, but also with some light sound sensitivity. So sometimes I maybe wear sunglasses inside.
Look at our YouTube channel. Porter looks like the lead singer from the Lumineers right now.
The Lumineers?
Yeah. Wesley.
I've gotten a lot of Joe Walsh. I've never gotten the Lumineers before.
He's got the long hair like you have, and he wears sunglasses. But anyway, I applaud you for your optimism. When I asked you on Friday, will we be previewing the NBA Finals or Game 7, you said Game 7.
Yeah.
Didn't go our way.
It didn't. It's a bummer. It's a bummer, but it gives Knicks fans like almost like a out of your misery moment. Like just move on. It's It was what was going to happen at some point. So stop putting it off. The old Yeller. We got old Yeller this weekend. But other than that, the weekend was fun.
Was that a reference to a dog being shot and put down? Is that what that was?
Yeah, sorry about that.
You take an edible this morning, or you good?
No, I'm great.
All right.
Old Yeller might not be the right reference.
I understand what you're saying because, look,
a little visual.
We'll talk about it. Like if you're a Knicks fan, you have to view this year as a total win.
Yeah.
If for no other reason you blocked Boston from winning another championship.
And old Yeller had a great, awesome life.
Did he?
Lovely yellow lab on a big farm out living in the grass.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it came to a screeching halt.
Well, sometimes it does.
It does. And it happened on Saturday. All right. Kyle Bonagura, college football, our first guest right out of the gates. But before we get to Kyle, on a Monday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends too at Prize Picks, it's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Prize Picks, best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash with millions of members. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players. For a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash, you can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Do you know ball? Question mark. There's only one series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sport. So here's what you do. You download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700, and when you play your first $5 lineup, they're just going to hook you up with $50 on the house. You do not have to win that lineup. Just play it and use the promo code ESPN700, and they're automatically going to give you $50 in your account. So check them out. Prize Picks, where you can run your game all season long. All right. Quick thought on the Pacers-Knicks series. And, you know, it's interesting looking at where the Knicks are now and really understanding that this is ahead of schedule for where they were supposed to be. Nobody thought they were beating Boston. And if Jason Tatum doesn't get hurt, they probably don't. That's my opinion. Or if Joe Mazzulla decides to do anything other than continue to jack up contested 32-footers, Boston probably wins it. My guess is Boston was watching Indiana, New York, and they were livid at themselves for not taking advantage of this opportunity. Because Boston really was built for one more run based off of how their books are structured now. Because they have new ownership, and according to Bobby Marks, their luxury tax bill next year, just to have their roster, will be north of $500 million. I don't care how much money you have. That's a lot of money. Just to pay for the right to have the team, let alone what you're actually paying the players. So my guess is the new ownership is going to task their front office, which no longer includes Austin Ainge. We'll get to the Austin news in a bit. to make some hard decisions. And that probably means maybe Jaylen Brown's available, maybe Derek White, maybe Drew Holiday. Are there takers for Drew Holiday at this stage of his career? Jaylen Brown is making a lot of money. Anybody would pay Jaylen Brown that money because he's that good. But no one's going to take Tatum. I mean, Tatum's out for an entire year. You got to wait to see what that looks like. So Boston was really built to win this thing again this year, and they should have. I mean, they were my pick to win it, certainly the East. And then I think a lot of people thought we were just in for Boston OKC in the final because they were both so good. When they were healthy in the regular season, of course, Oklahoma City lives up to their side of things. And Boston with an unexcusable loss to a team that they're just better than. So the fact that the Knicks were able to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals, like if you're a Knicks fan at all, it's a win. It doesn't make the end better, and it certainly stings even more that it's the freaking Pacers, who I just can't stand and have not been able to stand for a number of different years. And I have a lot of respect for Rick Carlisle. I think this is a really, really good basketball team. And Rick himself has been pretty front-facing and honest about how good they're playing. It's kind of interesting to hear him, both after the Cavs series and now after the Knicks series, basically say they ran into us when we were playing our best basketball of the year by far. Indiana started out the year 10-15. There were people wondering if they needed to break up Siakam and Halliburton. Side note, how is Tyrese Halliburton not the MVP of that series? Siakam was awesome, and this isn't like a Andre Iguodala wins the finals MVPs over Stephen Curry. I mean, that was historically stupid for anybody who voted for Iguodala over Steph. Like, Steph was the only reason they were in that series in the first place and able to win it. Yes, I know Iguodala guarded LeBron, save it. Like, that was such a crime. It was so atrocious. This wasn't that bad. But if you go back and watch the postgame stuff, as Ernie Johnson is about to announce the Eastern Conference Player of the Series, I think it's the Larry Bird Award now, and the league is doing this thing where they've created more awards so they can attach historical, special names to the awards, and that's great. It's all good. You should respect the history of the league and the game. But when Ernie said, and the winner of the Eastern Conference Finals MVP is, Tyrese Halliburton took a step towards the stage. He started walking towards Ernie, and he said, Pascal Siakam. And if you look at Halliburton's face, he's like, wait, what? It was wild. I mean, and the vote was 5-4. There were only 9 voters. But he was ready to go take the trophy, and then Ernie announces it was Siakam. And look, like I said, this is not like an atrocity of historic proportions like the Steph Iguodala stuff thing. But Tyrese Halliburton makes them go. He dictates pace in a way that very few lead guards in the NBA can do right now. He was more or less really, really good all series long. His worst game was the game that the Knicks got in New York. But he makes everything go for them. And Siakam did a really, really good job because, and we'll get to the cat stuff, I think the Knicks have a cat problem. I'm not sure, and for listeners that are confused, that's Karl Anthony Towns. They don't literally have cats everywhere. But I think they've got an issue with cat. I'm not sure what you do with it. But Karl Anthony Towns ate Miles Turner's lunch. And then when they tried former Jazzman Tony Bradley, that didn't work either. And also another side note, ultimately, if Thomas Bryant is knocking down threes, we can go home. There's nothing else to do. Their third string center who could barely get on the floor is knocking down threes, like he's Ray Allen all of a sudden. It's that was a wild side note. Former Nick Obi Toppin was really good. But I said this after Game 5 in preparation for Game 6. I'm like, the one way the Knicks can get this done is if they replicate the defensive effort and intensity in Game 6 that we saw in Game 5. And they didn't. They just didn't. The closeouts, once again, were horrible. Cat defensively was a sieve, and Indiana feasted on him. It was just a decent Jalen game, not a great Jalen game. OG was awesome. Mikal Bridges has taken a ton of crap in the New York media today because the Knicks traded all their draft capital for him, and he was just okay, not great. But for an elimination game, the fact that Landry Shamet may have been one of your best players and at least was out there giving effort, and we saw 12 minutes from DeLon Wright, they got ran off the floor in the third quarter. And what happened at the start of the game is exactly what we've been talking about all along. The Pacers want to push it. They want to get up and down, and they want to get up and down off of makes. And if you're Tom Thibodeau and you're watching tape of Game 6 and you see 4 runouts for dunks or layups off Nick makes, that is going to haunt you your entire offseason. This was an effort loss. Do I think the Pacers are better than the Knicks? I do. I think it's a deeper team. I think they have more variance in which they could play. And New York is so isolation heavy. It's not just Jalen, but a lot of it is Jalen. Cat is more of an ISO big. You know, they throw it to Cat at the top of the key, and if he can dribble by you, he will, because he's a big that can move pretty well and can dribble it okay and shoots it well from the outside. But even if it's OG or Mikal, like, they get the ball and they just go one-on-one isolation. And ultimately, that to me has a natural ceiling. And also, as far as a natural ceiling goes, this is something that we've seen for a number of years. Like, a good team will manifest itself with their best player being a small point guard. One example that comes to mind is the Chris Paul Clipper team, you know, Lob City, with Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan and ESPN playing a freaking siren every time Blake dunked it. But Chris Paul was their best player. CP3 made them go. And they were really good. They won a lot of regular season games. But they could never fully get past their Western Conference peers who had superior offensive ball-in-hand initiators that were just bigger players and better athletes. And the last team to win NBA championships, while their best player was a smallish ball-in-hand point guard, was the Detroit Pistons of the late 80s with Isaiah Thomas. It has not happened since. Don't give me Steph. Okay, Steph is a unicorn, all right? And Steph is not this smallish ball-in-hand offensive initiator. You know, Steph does not fit the bill, okay? And by the way, generationally special and unique. So when it comes to a team built for success, the Knicks, I think, may have hit a ceiling with this group, in my opinion. Now, I don't know what you do, because when you look at their books, they're paying Mikal, OG, Cat, and Jalen, and Josh. Okay, so those 5 players are under contract for a few years at big money. There's already rumors that the Phoenix Suns would like to make a run at Cat, because Cat played with Devin Booker at Kentucky. So do the Knicks look at a Cat Durant swap? And you go into next year with Mitchell Robinson as your starting center, and you get rid of the Cat, and then you get rid of the Cat experience altogether. Like, Cat to me is a little bit like Donovan in a lot of ways, but kind of in the vein of you have a natural expiration date and a natural ceiling if you're going to play your basketball through him and you're going to play him big minutes. He is a sieve on defense. He doesn't move well, and Indiana did a really good job of confusing him. Sometimes it was drop, sometimes he would blitz, and then every game, 2 or 3 just brain farts where he commits fouls, and then he looks at the ref like, what did I do? And then you see the replay, and you're like, you literally grabbed the guy. It was so obvious that you committed the dumbest fouls, and the Knicks needed more from him. You know, and it kind of sounds weird to criticize Cat after, honestly, a spring where he played better than I really ever thought he could in the playoffs. But Game 6, the problems with Cat as your starting center that plays 35 to 38 minutes a night were magnified in Game 6. And Indiana deserves a lot of credit for the way they attacked him. They deserve a lot of credit for the way they attacked Jalen. And this whole narrative, like, Jalen's not a good defensive player, it's not only that Jalen's not a great defensive player. It's that Rick Carlisle knows New York relies so much on Jalen offensively that if you make him work on defense, he won't have the same energy to close out offensively that he would otherwise. And when the game started and it was up and down, back and forth, I was thinking the same thing. Like, okay, it's working now for the Knicks, but come fourth quarter, come second half, they're going to be tired again. Indiana's going to be rested because Indiana is used to playing 11 players 15-plus minutes a night. And this is not sustainable for a team like New York that's not built to get up and down for 40, 48 minutes like Indiana is. And sure enough, second half starts, and you see the Knicks' legs start to go. And Indiana just runs them off the floor. And the lack of effort was pretty stunning, but I think a lot of it was fatigue. And New York's got decisions to make this offseason as the Indiana Pacers are marching on to the NBA Finals. Only the second Finals appearance for the Pacers. Last one was 25 years ago when they beat the Knicks in 6 and went to the finals and lost. So there you go. Also, and we'll get to more of this coming up with a couple of guests. Smitty's going to be live in studio. The Utah Jazz have hired Austin Ainge, the son of team CEO and alternate governor Danny Ainge, away from the Celtics. And now Austin is the team's president of basketball operations. When you read through some of the Ryan Smith statements and some of the comments, it sounds like Austin and Justin will report to Danny, not, Justin reports to Austin, Austin reports. It sounds like Justin Zanuck and Austin Ainge are kind of linear on their place in the org chart or whatever, and will report to Danny, who then, of course, reports to Ryan. So we'll get into this. Austin spent 17 years with the Boston Celtics, played his college basketball at Brigham Young. So we'll get into it coming up in just a little bit, but we do have to catch a break. Right off the bat, though, we will do some college football. Kyle Bonagura from ESPN, our first guest on this Monday Drive. Don't go anywhere. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Get back to some NBA playoff stuff. Coming up in a bit, also the news of the day today that Austin Ainge has been hired as the president of basketball operations by the Utah Jazz. Richard Smith will be live in studio. We have Tom Haberstroh as well. If time allows, we'll do a little RSL, but they're an unserious soccer club this year. College football right out of the gates, though, with our buddy Kyle Bonagura, who covers college football, sometimes a little soccer as well for ESPN. Kyle, happy Monday. It's been a minute. How you been, bud?
I'm been good, Spence. How are you?
I'm good. So some interesting off-season college football storylines. Let's start with the new CFP expansion proposal, the 5+11 model, which, of course, has support in some areas and detractors in others. The Big 12 the Big 12 kind of summer meetings were held this weekend in Orlando. Heard a lot from Brett Yormark. But what say you about what's on the table? 5+11, 16, you think that's right with the AQ bids? 4 for the Big 10, 4 for the SEC, 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12. Do you like that model? Do you think that's where we're headed?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's where it's headed. As far as if I like it, I kind of felt like 16 was the right number from the beginning. The buys it felt like the NCAA always takes small steps, right? They're not willing to, you're willing to go from 2 to 4, from 4, then you jump, I guess they did jump past 8 to 12. But it felt for me like if you're going to add a real playoff, 16, it makes it nice and tidy, right? There's the problem that you have with 12, and there was there's problems with all these different formats, was that you continue to devalue the bowls, right? And so now, and that's always going to be the case wherever you cut it off. But I think once you got to 12, like when you get the 13 through 25, those bowl games were essentially meaningless, right? And so you have the trickle down effect on how it impacted bowls was problematic. So I thought, might as well just add more playoff games, make those other teams play meaningful games at the end of the year. I really like the FCS model. That's even bigger than that. I think it's 24 teams. Like for me, that you could do buys with early round buys and include more teams. It doesn't necessarily add too many games in total for the whole country, right? But you get to have meaningful games at the end of the season. So yeah, like 16, I think there's more football, and I like having more football that matters. And I think it's the simplest way to look at it. That's why it's a good thing. As
far as the multiple automatic qualified spots for the Big 10 and the SEC, essentially taking half the spots, and then the Big 12 and the ACC getting 2, and then leaving 1 for the group of 5, and then the at-large stuff. Do you think that's where we're going as well, or do you think there's enough pushback from people that aren't in the Big 10 and the SEC to maybe just make it a straight 16 team with 11 plus 5? How do you think that plays out?
I think it should be 11 plus 5. It would be kind of a bully. I feel like they would be bullying the other conferences if they added more automatic bids for the SEC and the Big 10. Because the thing is, they don't need the automatic bids. There's not going to be, you can game it out however you want to do it. It's just, I don't see a scenario where that would even really come into play, right? Maybe you can get creative with it. But yeah, make it, give it, for me, the 5 is what makes sense. One for outside of the power conferences, give the champions a bid. But at the same time also, if you're a champion of one of those conferences, you don't even need the automatic bid at this point. It mattered more at 12. It certainly mattered at 4, where they valued conference championships to a degree. But at 16, if you win one of those leagues, you're going to get in. So it's almost kind of a moot point. It's interesting to see how they'll use that to determine, seeding or home field advantage, those sorts of things. I think is where it gets more interesting. But as far as getting in the field, I don't think that is ultimately going to make that much of a difference, however they decide to structure it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well said. So the 16-team expanded model will come our way 2026. This year, we will have the 12-team format, but it will be straight seeding. I don't know why they didn't do this initially, Kyle. This seems to be one of those very common sense type things that should have been done right away. But, we already got your thoughts on the 16-team thing, but that's in a year. So what do you think about the 12-team format moving just to straight seeding this fall?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, like you said, for me, it was like an obvious move. And as you know, I do like the bold projections during the regular season. And this is something that I identified the first week I did it, the first week after games were played, where the impact, like I understand like the idea of it, like they wanted to reward those, like the Big 12 champion and the ACC champion, right? They wanted to give them a reward for winning their conferences. And like in theory, like I could understand the logic, but how it played out, like it didn't play out that way because it effectively punishes the top seed. Like any playoff format should be designed to give an advantage to the number one seed. That's why you're valuing the regular season, right? Like that's very basic with competitive sports, right? But by giving buys to in the 3 and 4 spot for teams that weren't actually the third and fourth best teams, it created inequitable matchups in the quarterfinal round, and it ended up punishing Oregon. Like Oregon ended up playing Ohio State, a team that would have been seeded differently. So it really messed up with how it should have gone and punished the team at the top. So I think this is I wrote this almost every week during the season. Kept hammering it the point home because it just never made sense once you went and kind of saw how it was going to play out. So I'm happy that they were able to act quick and restore order in that respect.
Do you still think, Coach Witt was on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and he continues to talk about the Super League potential possibility that you and I have discussed for years now, and college football writers have written about for years now. And I don't know, man, like it feels like this has become more fluid, in my opinion, than actually something concrete that I believe is inevitable. At one point, I was convinced that we were high speed ahead to something that looks a lot like the NFL with 2 conferences, whatever you call them, Big Ten, SEC, grab, number of schools that they want. And then suddenly that's AFC, NFC, and we have like a miniature NFL model in college football. I don't know how convinced I am that we're headed there now, Kyle. What about you?
So I think I'm still like pretty confident eventually we'll get there. I think for me, the question is just like, how long is it going to take? It's not going to happen in 5 years. It might not happen in 10 years, but eventually, once, and I think too, is like, you have to kind of get people to cycle out, right? The current the leadership in place across the country, conferences and schools, you can kind of get a sense of what they want right now. And that's going to hold court for a while, right? But those people will only be in those jobs for so long. And then eventually you'll have, an SEC commissioner who doesn't care about Vanderbilt, or an Alabama athletic director or president who pushes for, hey, like, why is Vanderbilt still why are we still on equal playing field with them? Like, why are we peers with them, as opposed to creating a larger pie and less people to pull from, or less schools to pull from. So I think like eventually it still gets there, but it's just a matter of waiting to see how long that will take. I mean, in hindsight, it's kind of remarkable that this didn't all happen faster. Like seeing how it has all played out so quickly, like there's just so much money at stake that eventually money will always drive this. Once the kids are employees, like that's going to change things. Like there's eligibility questions that are still kind of up in the air and kind of fluid. So there's so many things that are going to change. I think eventually there'll just be too much money for the schools at the top not to be tempted to take a bigger slice.
So we've all been waiting for the House v. NCAA settlement, and, we continue to wait. And it's been kind of wild to watch what has unfolded surrounding this dynamic with certain states passing laws, kind of behind closed doors, where it's like, yeah, our schools do not have to adhere to whatever that settlement says. And then the P4 programs are all writing contracts to say, well, actually, you do if you want to hang out with us. And so you have this interesting juxtaposition and dynamic where Tennessee, among others, have literally passed legislation saying that their member institutions that reside in their state don't even have to adhere to what House v. NCAA has to say about NIL distributions and such. The NCAA has already been told, like, you're not allowed to essentially put any sort of restriction. You can't enforce any of your rules. Like, it all continues to be very fluid. I think maybe I was a little bit hopeful and pie in the sky and maybe naive, believing that the House v. NCAA settlement would suddenly give us guardrails and guidelines we've been looking for. So how is this going to all play out, and what's your understanding about where we're at in the process of the House v. NCAA?
I mean, that's a great question. I wish I had a nice, tidy answer for you, because it's just so messy. And I think What's difficult, right, is you have 50 states, or not quite that many in the NCAA that are kind of in play here. But the point is, you have all these state governments, you have local governments, you have private schools, you have public schools. There's so many different parties that are governed by different entities. To get them all on the same page is just so hard to do. And so ultimately, it's still unclear who gets final say, right? I mean, you've seen every lawsuit. Anytime the NCAA has been challenged in law over the last, pick your time period, like they've lost, right? Whether it's eligibility, whether that's, name anything. They've always sided with the players in their kind of chase to get more money and more, more distribution from the NCAA. And so I just don't see how that's ever going to it's going to change while you're still dealing with student athletes. And I think that's for me, out in the distance, it just seems inevitable that eventually they become employees. And once you're employees and you're not students and you're not kind of governed by Title IX in the same way, then you can say, okay, then salary caps become a little bit more real, right? Then you operate like a professional league, and the government isn't going to be able to step in and govern in the way it is, effectively doing now with the kind of looming House settlement. So yeah, I don't have a great answer for you, but it could, because there's just so many moving pieces that until you knock one domino down, it's really hard to say what's going to happen with the next one.
One of the walking lines you hear a lot, and I'm guilty of using it too, is, and sometimes maybe if you do what you and I do for a living, this is just like a smoke screen, when really what you're saying is, I don't understand any of this. So you land on, well, Saturdays in the fall will always still feel like Saturdays in the fall. Well, it doesn't feel that way for Washington State anymore, or Oregon State. And honestly, Kyle, Saturdays in the fall around here still feel a little bit different based off of the conference affiliation change, where for years it was Oregon and SC and the Pac-12 West Coast brands and Washington. And due respect to the Big 12, because it's at least a home for the University of Utah, the brands and teams that rolled through last year, it felt different. It just did. So my question is, will Saturdays in the fall still always feel like Saturdays in the fall, or is it just for a select few now?
Yeah, I hope so. And that's probably the best I can do. I mean, I do think that there is a novelty about the conference realignment that was interesting this year. You got to see new schools and new teams, and that part had some allure. But I do think that'll wear off, pretty quickly, at least for me. And eventually, when you're playing these games that you don't have strong regional or historic ties to, it won't be as fun. I mean, Utah benefited because it's in the same conference with BYU, so I think for a lot of people that localized it in a way that was you gain the rivalry back, and it's in a meaningful way. So there's give and take to some degree, but I do still feel like, as long as they're playing these games on campus, as long as those ties exist, attending the game is still going to feel pretty similar. I mean, the uniforms are going to be the same. You're cheering for football. At the end of the day, at its core, that's that experience. A lot would have to change for it to be, so different that it wouldn't be worth participating or paying attention to anymore. But the evolution is definitely going to keep happening, and to a degree, right? That's been college football for a long time. If you look over the 100 years, there's been so many different iterations of what the sport has looked like that, even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that looked very little like it did, 30 years before that. And so, in a way, change is just part of the sport, and I guess that's what we can continue to expect.
One more thing in this space, and I apologize if you feel like you've gone on Bloomberg News on a Monday afternoon, but I do want to ask you about another storyline. Brett Yormark, among many things he's had to say over the past 72 hours, is the Big 12 has elected to not accept private equity money for an ownership stake in the conference. And, about a year ago, I think it was Mark Lasry, if I remember correctly, the owner of the Bucks, who in a public forum said he planned on making an offer to Ohio State football to try to buy 49% of the Buckeyes. And there are rumors around here that some of the powerful folk that have deep pockets want to get involved in Utah or BYU football and potentially have an ownership stake. And now the momentum is going the other direction. Folks are now saying no to private equity money. I am no finance major, but my gut tells me this must mean that conferences and programs have done their own valuations on what they can make and understand that they don't need that money now. If they needed the money, they would take it. But it must mean that they don't want to sell any ownership in either conferences or teams because of how dumb the money continues to be with live TV rights. I mean, that's where my antenna goes when I keep hearing these stories that now go the other way as far as people not accepting private equity money. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's like everything's a negotiation, right? I think what happened was the Big 12, realized that they weren't going to get enough money. That there was like the offer wasn't big enough, right? Because if you had whatever the number is, right? Say like we'll just throw out a number that makes no sense, but you would have to accept, right? If the number was $50 billion, right? Of course they would have accepted private equity money at that number, right? But at a certain point, it's worth it, and they would have to say yes. But they just didn't get to that point, and so eventually, could that change? Like I think absolutely it could change, but right now they've made the determination that that sort of investment isn't in their best interest. And if and when that changes, like I think they'll be open to revisiting it. But for now, yeah, I mean, it hasn't happened yet. But just the idea that so many people have looked into it or considering it makes me think that eventually it'll probably happen. It'll just be a question of what the circumstance look like for that to be the case.
Let's move over here. Brian Santiago hired as BYU's athletic director, taking over for Tom Holmoe. So before I expand to the second part of the question, let me get your thoughts on that. And mostly, I'm quite sure you don't know Brian, but covering Tom Holmoe as BYU's athletic director, I think he did a remarkable job. Traversing through independence for a decade was a tough ask, but they were able to find a landing spot. Their basketball team is insanely good, and their football team is coming off a really nice year in the Big 12. So Brian inheriting an athletic department in really good shape as a result of the work that Tom did. So your thoughts on Tom Holmoe as he goes to spend the rest of his days on a beach somewhere, probably?
Yeah, no, I mean, as you know, I live here in the Bay Area, so my first kind of experience with Tom Holmoe was he was the coach at Cal. He's the coach or an assistant coach of the 49ers before that. So I was kind of like always generally aware of him in this space. And then, I had a chance to get to know him a little bit this past year with a few stories I was working on about BYU. And like, I think those interactions, like with Tom that I had, I really enjoyed all of them. For me, he was really good to work with. He was candid. He was open. He was a good storyteller. And then you can't argue with results of where the program is right now. I mean, you said it, basketball, football, both are in a really good spot, positioned to be good for a long time. Getting into the Big 12 was a big win after the odyssey of independence for so long. And so he leaves BYU in a spot where, for Brian, he can hope to build off that. Obviously, I think BYU, more than a lot of schools, has really benefited from the NIL shift. They have a lot of people who are willing to help out with those programs to help them stay competitive. And so, yeah, I have only nice things to say about Tom and kind of the way he handled himself in personal actions with me and just kind of the big picture accomplishments that he had in his time down in Provo.
I think the Santiago news became official on May 19th. And then on May 21st, the Salt Lake Tribune reports that Jake Retzlaff is being sued by a woman here in Salt Lake. It is a civil lawsuit, and we've talked about it on the show. These are not criminal charges. So the Tribune reports on it, and then you wrote on it for ESPN. You were actually able to uncover some new details. I don't know that I have a question, and I don't want to make this a football story because it isn't. He is the starting quarterback for BYU and coming off a really good year. But I wonder throughout the process that you went through to kind of have the discovery for what you wrote on the .com for ESPN, what you would like to share about this story, and if you have any insight on what the next steps are.
Yeah, these are always tough to report on. You get into this industry hoping to write about sports, and you end up reading a civil case about a really gruesome allegation of rape, right? I've read a lot of these sorts of civil filings over the years, and this is one of the worst ones that I've read, just in how graphic it was. That's all part of the public domain at this point. You don't know. These are, again, like I can't stress this enough. It is an allegation, but when I read it, if the allegation is true, it's as serious a case of rape and sexual assault that I've read, covering sports. So beyond that, it's tough to say much other than kind of like the news, right? He was never arrested. The Provo Police Department denied the woman's claim that she was told that sexual assault victims never seek justice. They had a pretty lengthy statement about that. There'll be some time before Retzloff's lawyer will reply to the lawsuit. It sounds like they're pretty adamant in their comments that it didn't happen, and so they'll reply. We'll see what their kind of rebuttal is. I'm sure they'll try to get the case dismissed, but other than that, there's not a lot to say. It's especially without a police report that documents anything from the time that it allegedly took place.
All right, Kyle, before I set you loose, and I always kind of chuckle when I do this to you because it's early June, and we have no idea what these teams are going to look like come fall. But I will ask you about the University of Utah because we're a mile away from Rice-Eccles Stadium, and we're the home of the Utes. So Vegas has set the over-under at 7.5. That's mid-table for Big 12. I think most of the preseason prediction stuff I've seen has Utah anywhere between like 4 and 7. So I think it's probably better for them not to have these lofty expectations like they did a year ago. And, of course, the health stuff with Cam Rising and all the stuff that went down has been something we've covered ad nauseum. So it's a new quarterback. It's a new offensive coordinator. PFF has them ranked as the number 2 offensive line in the country behind Bama. So they're going to be stacked where they need to be in the trenches like they always are. So I won't ask you about specifics because I'm quite sure you're not grinding on Utah's too deep in June. But just your thoughts on what a potential bounce back season could look like for the Utes year 2 in the Big 12.
Yeah, I certainly expect them to be much better than a year ago. It's hard to 2 and 7. It's hard to be worse, as they say, right? And I think like the schedule is, it's manageable. I think non-conference UCLA, Cal Poly, Wyoming, those are all winnable games. So you expect to be 3-0 headed into conference, and then if you go 4 and 5, even in conference, that puts you at 7 wins, which would be a 2-win improvement. And like you said, it's tough to break it down right now and feel any sort of level of confidence. But I think having Dampier come over with Jason Beck, he knows the offense, he knows the system. That's a model that's worked at a number of places over the years, moving a quarterback with a coach, as opposed to just kind of grabbing someone or even just matriculating someone on the roster. So I think there's like reason to be optimistic that they can be successful. It's going to be a different look. Dampier ran a lot more than Utah has expected its quarterbacks to do in recent years. And so I think that there will be a lot more of, that quarterback run game will give them a new fresh look that they probably needed after things got stale. So yeah, I think Utah will be better in terms of how much better, let's wait and see.
All right, my friend. Well, I appreciate your time today. Hope all is well with you. Have a great week, and we'll chat soon. Thanks, Kyle.
All right. Thanks, man. See you.
Kyle Bonagura covers college football and a little soccer from time to time for our friends at ESPN. I'm noticing that he never tweets anymore. But his work is up on his Twitter page, at Bonagura ESPN is where you find him. So appreciate Kyle's time brought to you today by our friends at IFA Country Stores. When the seasons change, I don't know if you've noticed, that's right now. If you're like any good coach, you'll put together your game plan for a healthy green lawn, and you'll turn to the experts at IFA. Check out their 4+ lawn care program. Everything you need to make your yard a hit. It's the ultimate lawn owner power move at IFA and IFA.coop. All right, we'll catch a quick break. We got 1 hour down. We got 3 hours to go. Back to the NBA during the 3 o'clock hour with Tom Haberstroh and then Smitty live in studio. We will bring you comments from Austin Ainge today as he's set to address the media in the 3 o'clock hour as he is named the new president of basketball operations for the Utah Jazz. So stay tuned for that on a Monday Drive right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We're proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Well, we were hoping on a Monday edition of the program to be previewing a Game 7 tonight between the Knicks and the Pacers at Madison Square Garden in Midtown Manhattan. But MSG is dark tonight unless they have a concert or whatever's going on. There's no basketball. NBA Finals begin on Thursday. Let's do some NBA with our next guest on a Monday, Tom Haberstroh. Buddy, how are you?
Doing good, Spence. How are you?
I'm good. So let's be reductive right off the start. Why are we not previewing a Game 7 tonight between the Knicks and the Pacers?
Well, the defense of the Knicks just couldn't keep up with the Pacers. Karl Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson as your rim protectors, it didn't bode well for the Knicks. They've got Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, who are two one-way superstars. They are superstar offensive players. But defensively, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Mitchell Robinson to a lesser degree. He was coming off the bench for most of this season. Those three wing guys were supposed to be more than enough defensively to cover up and hide Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. But you can't excuse Karl Anthony Towns having one block in that entire conference finals. It just can't happen. And it's the first time that we've seen a player that size in the conference finals play that many minutes and have that few number of blocks. It's just very difficult to win when your best center is not a rim protector and a good defender. Now, Nikola Jokic gets away with that. He's not as soft as Karl Anthony Towns is as a rim protector. The defense for the Knicks was really their undoing, is that they just were not able to get enough scoring in order to compensate for that end of the floor. And the Pacers, they move the ball, they exploit matchups. Pascal Siakam, Tyrese Halliburton were excellent at creating mismatches and taking advantage of the Knicks' slow defense. You know, like Karl Anthony Towns, how many times was he jogging back on defense or complaining about a foul call on his back? And the Pacers just ran him out of the gym. And ultimately, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges had to hit shots. Had to be not just D, but also the three. And they couldn't do it. So the Indiana Pacers move on after being this is the crazy stat. The Indiana Pacers, before this season, sports books had projected that the New Orleans Pelicans would have a better shot at making the NBA Finals than the Indiana Pacers.
Jeez.
So that is how much of an underdog this Pacers team, even though they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, they were just, I think it was plus 2,500 to win the East and make it to the NBA Finals. And when you compare their title odds, they had the same or worse title odds than the New Orleans Pelicans. So this really is one of the most unlikely NBA Finals matchups, and that's mostly coming from that East side with the Indiana Pacers.
Your point about the Knicks defense is spot on, and that's the thing that I've been talking about on the show, because the two games where they guarded, they won. But they only guarded for 2 games, Tom. And, you know, I said on Friday before we signed off, prior to that Game 6 on Saturday, like, I know that the Pacers were getting, a lot of credit, a lot of love for their shot making, the Game 1 comeback where Nesmith went crazy. You go back and watch the final few minutes, the Nesmith shots were practice shots. He was stepping into mostly wide open threes. Give him credit for turning into Ray Allen circa 1998 or whatever, but I don't fully understand how a team whose head coach is all defense was such a sieve on that side of the floor more often than not. And I do think it comes down to Cat. I do think you have a Cat problem. Now, I also will say that Cat was better in this playoff run than I've ever seen him play in playoff basketball. I don't want to make this like I'm only crushing Cat, but you look at their books, Tom, they've got their 5-man guys signed for a while, but I don't know. I think you do need to figure something out with Karl Anthony Towns, because he just does not play defense and commits some of the dumbest fouls that I've ever seen watching NBA basketball. So if you're Leon Rose and you look at a season that I think a little bit is $20 in the back pocket of jeans that you pull out of the dryer, because you did get to the Eastern Conference Finals, you did block Boston from winning a championship, but I don't know that this group has more in them than what we saw. I don't know that this is an NBA Finals group. I don't know that I would pick them to make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals next year. What does the offseason look like in New York, Tom?
Well, the tough thing here is a couple things. One, they put in 5 first-round picks and cleaned out their cupboard of first-round picks, tradable first-round picks, to get Mikal Bridges, and he just wasn't good enough to justify that price tag. He just wasn't. He was softer defensively, not as physical as you would want someone point-of-attack defender. He's a guy who loved the mid-range and hit a bunch of mid-range shots, but became kind of Ben Simmons-esque yips. He and Josh Hart just did not want to take a layup. And for that, you gave up 5 first-round picks. And the only tradable first-round pick that you have is Washington's top 8 protected pick next year. And that's almost certainly not going to convey. And then it becomes 2 second-round picks. So really the Knicks don't have any tradable first-round picks. They have a couple swaps that they can do. But when, let's say, you're offering the Milwaukee Bucks, Karl Anthony Towns, and 2 pick swaps, well, when you're acquiring Giannis Antetokounmpo, how valuable is a pick swap if you're offering it to Milwaukee as a carrot in that trade? Milwaukee looks at that and says, I mean, really? How much? What are the odds that we're going to say, yeah, the Knicks with Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Giannis Antetokounmpo are going to have a worse team than the Milwaukee Bucks with Karl Anthony Towns? So it's like you look at a potential blockbuster trade, you put it on the table for Giannis Antetokounmpo. If Giannis even wants out of Milwaukee, Leon Rose has to convince Giannis Antetokounmpo that the New York Knicks are the team for him. He's not a CAA client, and we've talked about this before, is that the New York Knicks have aligned themselves with Leon Rose's former agency, CAA. He used to run the basketball side of CAA, and his Rolodex is super deep in terms of the clients that he had in the NBA, including LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. You go on down the list, he had an incredible stable of NBA players on his list. Karl Anthony Towns might have been the most lucrative one of all. Is that when you look at the contract that he signed, Leon Rose was the biggest benefactor there, and it was his largest client when he was on the agency side. But Giannis is at Octagon. And so the CAA link that he has with Jalen Brunson, his son, Leon Rose's son, is Jalen Brunson's agent at CAA, Sam Rose. If you look at OG Anunoby, CAA. If you look at Josh Hart, CAA. Karl Anthony Towns, CAA. The New York Knicks have allocated $130 million of their payroll this year to CAA clients. That's the largest sum in the NBA for any team and agency. So it's very closely aligned. The bonds between CAA and the Knicks are very strong, right? So you got to convince Giannis, we are the team for you. If you want out of Milwaukee, we are the team for you. But that's not the hard part. I wrote for Yahoo Sports yesterday in a column. The hard part for Leon Rose, are you really going to betray Karl Anthony Towns like that? He was Karl Anthony Towns' agent before he was picked number 1 overall. He was close with Karl Anthony Towns and Worldwide West when Karl Anthony Towns decided to go play for the national team, the Dominican national team. The coach was John Calipari, who then coached him at Kentucky. Like they're very close and they go way back, right? So now that you're on the Knicks, is Leon Rose going to be able to look at Karl Anthony Towns and say, we're going to trade you to Milwaukee for Giannis? That's going to be a tough proposition. Even if Giannis is like, I want to go to the Knicks, Leon Rose has to just like say, all right, this is a tough decision for me, but I am going to send you to Milwaukee. That's going to be tough. The other thing is like KD. What happens with KD? You know, Rich Kleiman, his agent, is a New York guy. And KD, everyone expects him to be on the market this summer, whether it's Minnesota or somewhere else. Houston, Miami, New York. New York, again, Karl Anthony Towns would have to go as that trade. Money-wise, you have to bring in a 3-team deal. And that might be a possibility. And the way that you might argue if you're the Knicks, all right, we get KD and we get off of Karl Anthony Towns' long-term money, we're going to able to get a better center to go next to KD, who probably can't guard fours consistently at this age. But you get off the long-term money because right now he's going to be an expiring deal next year. If Leon Rose looks at this and says, all right, maybe I don't trade you to Milwaukee, but you get to reunite with Devin Booker in Phoenix. He gets to take care of his client there. There's other options for the Knicks. They run it back. Maybe they move Mikal Bridges to Dallas or somewhere else where they can move Mikal and try to get maybe Daniel Gafford and Caleb Martin from Dallas, and Dallas upgrades on the point of attack defense next to Anthony Davis. And we know Nico Harrison, we know he wants defense wins championships, and right now their point of attack defense is like Klay Thompson and Cooper Flack. I don't think that that's going to work out for them this year if they want to win, and so maybe you propose that trade. But even then, it's very likely, Spence, that the Knicks just decide to run this back. I think Knicks fans would love to have Giannis. I think they would love to have KD. But it requires a CAA team to trade away their top CAA guy in Karl Anthony Towns. And it matters more than people realize, is these relationships over time. And Leon Rose has always been a very loyal guy. Jalen Brunson's father, Rick Brunson, was his first client, NBA client, and now he's the coach for Tom Thibodeau, another CAA client. So this, and of course, gets his son to be the star in New York. These bonds are very strong, and if they are going to upgrade next season, it's going to mean that the CAA link is going to be tested. And with Karl Anthony Towns, a CAA client, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Jalen Brunson, all CAA guys, I mean, are they going to be willing to move one of those guys to upgrade the roster, or are they just going to say, look, we're going to run it back next year, and we're going to improve. Everyone's got to improve in different ways. And that's what the Knicks are looking at is Karl Anthony Towns the guy? Or do you move him to try to get a superstar in KD and Giannis? So that's really what's on the table for them we don't know that Giannis is going to be a trade target this summer, but I can tell you, every team does these contingencies after the season. Is if we're going to upgrade this roster, how do we do it? And I wonder how willing they are in moving Karl Anthony Towns. He wore that jersey with so much pride and playing through that knee injury. But is the ceiling maybe Eastern Conference semifinals and finals if you have Karl Anthony Towns as your starting four and maybe your starting five? That's good. That's better than the Knicks have had in the last couple decades. But is it enough to win a championship? And I say no.
Do we talk enough about how elite Rick Carlisle is? I mean, I was going over some of the stuff this morning. And look, I'm a big Tom Thibodeau guy. And Tom was an assistant for Jeff, and so was able to get to know him. And to your point about where the Knicks find themselves now, it's so much better than anywhere they've been for decades. That if you run it back and Tom's the guy, then I think most Knicks fans would say, okay, like sign me up. It's at least nice to have a team that's relevant as opposed to what it's been for a while. But I think Rick took him to the cleaners. I thought this was a series where Tom was outcoached. I thought some of the challenges didn't look great early on. I don't know what sort of adjustments you make when it comes to Indiana's ability to get up and down, but I'm just imagining Tom watching tape of Game 6 and seeing 4 runouts off of makes for dunks and layups, and he's going, what are we doing? Rick gets his championship with a 2011 Dallas Mavericks team that was interesting, with Dirk being peak Dirk. That was Jason Terry, 6th Man of the Year award. That was Tyson Chandler, Defensive Player of the Year. But they won a couple of series where they were underdogs, and they beat the Heat in the finals. And now he has this group that nobody thought was going to, be relevant outside of maybe winning a series, and they're in the NBA Finals. I mean, I don't know, man. I feel like maybe the public conversation surrounding Rick Carlisle needs to start sounding maybe a little bit different. Give me your thoughts.
Well, the best ones always adapt, and it reminds me of Greg Popovich and how he regarded the three-point line or regarded zone defense or regarded different styles of play. And Rick Carlisle, that 2011 team, I covered that NBA Finals in Miami, and it was amazing to watch this veteran team rally together. Sean Marion, Dirk Nowitzki, Jason Kidd. Caron Butler. Like, this was a very old team. This team, the Indiana Pacers, couldn't be more different. They're led by Tyrese Halliburton, only a few years into the NBA, and the average age on this team is barely 26 years old. Where that Dallas team in 2011 was a bunch of dudes who are at the end of their careers, and so the ability to adapt in the NBA as a coach is something that I think is in direct contrast to Tom Thibodeau this series, where, you look at Tibbs, and Tibbs is Tibbs, for better or for worse. But he played that five-man lineup all season long, about 40 minutes a game, basically. The Brunson, Mikal, Hart, Anunoby, and Karl-Anthony Towns started them and played them into the ground. And they never got to a good defense. They never did. And then in game 3, he had to switch up and put Mitchell Robinson into the starting lineup. And I got to give it to Tibbs. Like, he did expand the rotation, and he did make that lineup change, but it did feel like a little bit too late. Not enough. When you talk about how stubborn Tom Thibodeau is, or I guess just hard-headed when it comes to who his guys are and what his beliefs are, it seemed like Rick Carlisle went the opposite direction all year. It was like, we're going to win by playing up tempo and running teams out of the gym with a deep roster, and we are going to, no matter what, stay true to our playing style and not rely on two guys to win us games. We're going to rely on Nesmith is going to win us a few games. Nembhard, you saw him in Game 6, how well he played in Game 6 and how well he played in previous series. This is a team that really just believed, Rick Carlisle believed in these role players to play like stars when they needed to. And unfortunately, on the Knicks side, the role players just fell apart. I mean, Deuce McBride, OG, Mikal, Josh Hart, they did not step up, whereas the Indiana Pacers and the belief that Rick Carlisle imbued in these guys, it really did seem like two very different coaches on different ends of the spectrum. And, 14 years ago when the Dallas Mavericks are winning the championship, and I told you that in 2025 the Indiana Pacers are going to win the East, I can't imagine you're going to say Rick Carlisle is going to be the architect of one of the best offenses in the NBA with a team that just runs teams out of the gym like 7 seconds or less. But that's what Rick Carlisle did, and I really appreciate how he's been able to adapt as a coach.
Indiana's consolation prize for making the NBA Finals is a matchup with a team right now, Tom, that just feels like they've found a little something. Well, not just found something. They've been historic all year, but I was hesitant and reticent, as I combine those two words in one question, to just anoint them because I'd never seen them make a long playoff run, and then joke's on me because they're everything you want. And they've been able to stay healthy, which this time of year is a massive thing. So what sort of chance do you give Indiana to make the NBA Finals interesting with Shea, the MVP, on one side? I am blown away with how many players Mark Daigneault has at his disposal. I heard somebody use the term he's like a starting pitcher with 6 different pitches. I mean, he can bring whatever the night needs. He can say, how do you want to play? Okay, that's fine. We'll beat you playing that way too. So can Indiana make this interesting, or does it feel like it's pretty overwhelming in Oklahoma City's favor?
Barring injury, they have a slim to none chance of making this a series.
Yeah.
OKC is just that good. When you look at the regular season point differential between these two teams, it's one of the largest we've ever seen, if not the largest in NBA history in terms of finals matchups. Like, the Thunder had one of the biggest point differentials, meaning they outscored the opponent by over 12 points a game in every game this season, on average about 12 points a game. The Pacers were good this regular season, winning 50 games. But when you look at what the Pacers like to do, the Thunder are well equipped to match that. The Thunder do not turn over the ball. And the Indiana Pacers are a team that really likes to run out, like you said, get out in transition and take advantage of a team that can be careless with the ball. And the Thunder just do not turn over the ball, and they're well coached. And I just think that this is a team, the Thunder, with all their weapons, and how much rest they've gotten coming into this series, how healthy they are coming into this series, how confident they are coming into this series. They just dismantled the Minnesota Timberwolves that were a top 3 defense in the NBA this season. I just think that the Indiana Pacers are a really good story, a really good team, but the Thunder, and I've been hammering this and beating this drum all season long, this Thunder team is all-time good, like all-time good, like one of the 10 best teams we've ever seen put together. And of course, that final chapter of winning the NBA Finals will seal that. But everything I've seen from this season has told me that this is one of the best teams we've ever seen. I mean, they've already won 80 games this year, and there's only 3 other teams in NBA history who have won more at this point. And it's like peak Jordan and peak Warriors. So this team is so good. I'm going with OKC in 5, but honestly, my brain is telling me Heat in 4. OKC in 4.
Yeah.
Like my brain is telling me OKC in 4, but like my heart is saying OKC in 5. But I really do believe that this could end up in a sweep. If I'm named ink to paper, I'm probably going to go OKC in 5.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. All right, before I set you loose, kind of a surprising piece of news. I mean, I hadn't caught wind of any rumors in this direction, but the Utah Jazz have hired Austin Age as their president of basketball ops. And we're going to hear Austin speak here coming up in a bit. According to the statements that were made by Ryan Smith, Danny, no statements. He stayed completely out of it. Sounds like this is going to be a scenario where Zanuck is still the GM, and he works with Austin on a day-to-day basis, and both those two report to Danny. And then, of course, Danny reports to Ryan as the owner. So what we have here is a team that's locked up their head coach through 2031 potentially, and now has a front office that they've locked up for the foreseeable future as well, without a lot of results so far. And yes, they're 3 years into a rebuild. We'll see what the coming years bring. But what are your thoughts on the direction of the club out here, bringing in Austin Ainge as the president and kind of having their front office and their coaching staff locked in for a while?
Well, this is NBA front offices and power structures across the league. If people want to say nepotism, then I would say this is very common in the league. The Lacobs and Kirk Lacob in the front office, the owner's son in the front office there. You look at the Colangelos in Phoenix and in Toronto. You look at the Airsons in Miami, similar story. You look at across the league, you're going to have this, and I'm not saying that Danny Ainge is the owner, but I think people are crying foul at the idea that the CEO, Danny Ainge, would hire his son to run basketball ops. And I'm just like, I mean, this has been the NBA for a very long time, is we've seen this kind of relationship. And it's just another one of these father-son combos in ownership and in front office. Austin comes very highly regarded in the Boston front office, of course, from Danny Ainge, of course. But I would also say that I think it's important to have a younger GM or someone who has a lot more ties to like the grassroots level NBA when the league is getting younger. And in order to draft these guys, you don't have as much tape because of NIL and all the transfer portals. You need someone who has their boots on the ground and have a lot of intel. And that typically comes from a profile of like Austin Ainge, who's younger and has a lot more relationships on the younger side than maybe Danny Ainge did. And you see this in the NBA a lot is in the Charlotte Hornets organization with Michael Jordan. Mitch Kupchak was the GM for Michael Jordan. Like Mitch Kupchak isn't going to every gym and going to all of the European and going to every AAU tournament because look, the guy had a great run with the Lakers, but you need someone younger to burn that midnight oil in ways that Austin Ainge will be doing that for the Utah Jazz. So it's people might say that this is kind of a corrupt thing to do because the CEO just hired his son to run basketball ops, but Danny Ainge has earned that right. And I would also say that this is nothing new in the NBA and that you see these types of things all across the league. And that is a story as old as time in the NBA.
Well, Tom, appreciate the time. Was hoping to talk Game 7 at MSG tonight, but hopefully the NBA Finals carry some intrigue. Where can everybody go get that great work of yours?
Yeah, Yahoo Sports. You can check out that column about the three trades that I wrote out about the New York Knicks, where they go from here. And also, you can check out Basketball Illuminati, the NBA podcast that we do at Count the Dings with Amin Al Hassan. And, of course, Top Chef, if you're a big fan of that show. I got my Pack Your Knives podcast as well as my newsletter, Tom the Finder. Lots of places, but it's always great to spend time with you, Spence.
The great Tom Haberstroh, Monday afternoon. We'll catch a quick break. We're going to bring in Richard Smith live in studio. Austin Ainge currently is speaking to the media. We'll bring you some sound in about an hour from now. But Tommy stops by today, courtesy of our friends at Advanced Window Products. Was your house too hot over the weekend? Well, if it was, there's a good chance you might need new windows. And if you don't replace your windows, you're going to have to jack up the AC, and it will cost you a lot of money and be very uncomfortable. The nice thing about Advanced Window Products, run, of course, by our guy, Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sac Lake City, and Jake Weber, his business partner. They're great dudes, and they come from great families. This is a family-owned business. They will take care of you, and they're offering a deal as summer approaches where you get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. That's right, $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. So if you've been waiting to get it done, right now is a great time. Now, if you are considering maybe waiting until the fall, when it's school season, maybe you're going to sell your home. Well, if you call today, you're going to lock in that savings regardless of when they come to you. So give them a call, lock in the savings of $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more at 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or you can always check them out online at advancedwindows.com. All right, Smitty, live in studio for an entire hour. Coming up on the other side, right here on ESPN 700. All right, Austin Ainge is addressing the media as we speak. Porter's going to grab that sound, and we will bring it to you coming up in about an hour from right now. Richard Smith is live in studio for an entire hour on this beautiful Monday afternoon. Smitty, happy Monday, sir. How are you?
Spence, we're doing great. How you doing, man?
Well, good. Great to see Scotty Scheffler on a little heater, isn't he?
How about that?
Huh?
He is so laser focused, man.
He's like a robot.
Yeah, and the very little emotion, everything's just calm, whether he hits a one bad shot around or whatever it is, but he just kind of dials it in and just keeps going. He's that guy at the moment.
He is impressive to watch. But the big news of the day today, Smitty, the Jazz have announced they've hired Austin Ainge, Danny's son, and Danny's the CEO and alternate governor of the Jazz now. And Austin was with the Boston Celtics for 17 years. When Danny was there, he hired Austin to run the G League team. I've known Austin for years. I've known Danny my entire life. They're good people, they are. And a hire like this will always be met with a tremendous amount of skepticism. Porter, real quick, why don't you remind Smitty what the official stance is of the drive on nepotism?
Can't deal with them.
Can't win with them.
Nope.
We are strictly anti-nepotism on this program.
Okay.
I just want the community to know where we stand, right?
Well,
so you know the deal. We just had Tom Haberstroh on. The reality of the situation is, whether it's pro sports or real estate or whatever, most people find jobs based off relationships. This, of course, is a direct line between Danny and Austin. Ryan with a statement today saying he didn't even tell Danny that he was hiring Austin, which,
come on.
Right? But what are your thoughts on the decision of the Jazz to bring in Austin Ainge, and what do you know about Austin Ainge?
Well, I've known Austin for a long time. I knew him, not know him personally, but watched him when he was down at BYU. Most people don't realize it unless you're a real hardcore BYU fan. He played 4 years at BYU.
Yeah, he did. Yep.
And his senior year, he led the Mountain West Conference in three-point shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Shot over 50% from the floor from three. Was one of the top three-point shooters in the country in college basketball his senior year. Didn't get drafted. I don't think he was a pro player. He could have played overseas, but I think he wanted to get into what his dad was doing on the basketball side, and he ended up going down. Actually went down for a year to work at Southern Utah as an assistant to Roger Reed when Roger was down at Southern Utah for that little brief period.
Yep.
And then from there, Danny hired him to come back and work with him in Boston, and he got assigned to be the head coach of the Maine Red Claws, which is the G League team, or at that time the developmental team for the Celtics. For 2 years, he did that, and then he moved into a personnel job, scouting and working in the front office with Danny, and then progressed up the ladder. And Austin Ainge is a hard worker. He's a good guy. He's very diligent about his job. He works hard. I think if you talk to him about it, I would think one of the things he might say is that being the son of Danny Ainge, and especially in Boston, where Danny had a prominent role in the 80s as a player and then obviously was running the front office at that time. If you get hired, by your dad to do something like that, you got pressure on you to not only deliver in the job, but a lot of times you have to go above and beyond because everybody's looking to see what your faults are and what your shortcomings are.
Well said. Because
everybody wants to get on your case, right? Because of how they perceive you got the job. So, Austin worked, is very diligent. I would see him a lot on the road at college games. I would see him a lot overseas, scouting over the years. And, I think this is a great hire for the Jazz. I know they didn't have a person in that position. That's just a position they created, I assume, for Austin to get him into the fold with the Jazz. And he'll do, I would assume, don't know what his direct responsibilities are or if they've talked about that at all. But my guess is that they hired him to be one of the main guys on the personnel side and running the scouting department and doing all the stuff that analyzes, evaluates, and procures players, whether it's the draft, free agency, trade situations, and then Justin Zanuck still as the GM, will be tend to be, as he has been, more on the side of the business side, if you will, working with agents, working with the day-to-day grind in the office with employees and the team in terms of the coaching staff and all those kinds of things. And so I think it's great for the Jazz to get someone like Austin, a younger guy who's had a lot of experience and knows what it takes to win and has been around a winning environment. And I'm excited for him because I know he's a great person. I don't know him real well, but I know him well enough to comment that he's. I think it's a great get for the Jazz at this point in time.
Yeah, between my freshman and sophomore year in college at the U, I did a customer relations internship at Madison Square Garden, which entailed answering phone calls from angry New Yorkers that were mad about the Elton John concert because they couldn't get a hot dog. It was interesting work. And during that time, I became friendly with a guy named Dave Snowden, ironically enough is his name. He founded the Wheelchair Knicks. He's in a wheelchair himself. And he was like the one person in that building that was nice to me. I think everybody else was like afraid to talk to me or whatever because, your dad is your dad. And I went to dinner with Dave one night. I'm like, dude, I don't understand why no one in the building wants to. It feels like everybody ignores me. And he said a line to me that I've never forgotten. He said, Spence, I was 19 years old at the time. He said, you need to learn this lesson now. Nobody cheers for the son of a famous father. Right? And so this will be met inevitably with the nepotism this and, okay, is he really qualified that? But what you're outlining, Smitty, it sounds like you believe, regardless of what his last name is, he has put in the groundwork for this opportunity.
Well, he's worked in basketball ever since he got out of BYU. He's been doing it in the NBA for 17 years. He started with a brand new developmental league team in Maine, so they had to build that from the ground up. He was the head coach. He learned coaching philosophy and approach for 2 years, doing that as a 25, 26-year-old, I think he was at that time, and then moved down to Boston to work with his dad more directly in personnel and scouting, and has been doing that ever since. And, hey, Danny Ainge left the Celtics 4 years ago or 5 years ago, whatever it was. He retired. And Austin has been there since then, working with Brad Stevens, and they promoted him, I think, a few years ago to be an assistant GM along with Frank Zanin. Is it Frank Zanin? I forget. Yeah, Mike Zanin. I'm sorry, Mike Zarin, and those guys. They could have gotten rid of Austin Ainge if they didn't like him or he wasn't doing the job or whatever in Boston once his dad went away. But Austin's a hard worker. He's a good guy. He'll take some lumps on the nepotism thing, whatever, which to me is just lazy. I mean, Ryan Smith isn't going to hire somebody that he doesn't think can help them. I do think maybe they have to consider changing the name from the Utah Jazz to the BYU Jazz, because that's, they're top loaded with BYU guys now and the ownership and the front office, but Austin's a good guy and he's a hard worker. He knows what he's doing, and it'll be interesting to see how the group works in terms of how they realign stuff internally going forward.
So, and let's be clear, I know you're not behind closed doors over there anymore, but when you read the release and some of Ryan's comments, and we'll hear from Austin coming up in about 45 minutes, it sounds like Zanuck is your GM, Austin is your president of basketball ops. They're going to kind of work in lockstep together, and those two report to Danny as the CEO, and Danny then reports to Ryan, who's the owner. Sounds like that's the dynamic. Any thoughts on how, like, if you're Justin Zanuck today, sure, you're happy you're still the GM, but any thoughts on how this dynamic could play out? And there will be disagreements because there always are, and one voice has to make final decisions. That's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I would assume that they were on board. I mean, Austin, will come in and they'll all work together. I don't know how they work over there now, not being in the room, so to speak, but it seems like they're a very a collaborative group, that everybody has a say in the room, you have to listen also to your personnel people. Bart Taylor is over there, has been there since came with Dennis Lindsay from San Antonio and is still there as the vice president of player personnel. And Bart heads up all the scouting stuff. And you've got Sean James, and you've got Steven Schwartz over there, who's the cap guy and in charge of all that stuff. And you've got Marquise Newman, who heads up the Salt Lake City Stars and does a lot of personnel scouting, and Brian Pauga and Lane Odom, all those guys who are on the front lines of doing the scouting. And then overseas, they've got a group headed up by Regis Dardalis and Viren Bosniak over there in Europe, and Alex McDude in Paris. And so they've got a big group that all works together on the personnel stuff. And I would think Austin would be doing a lot of the coordinating and working with those guys on the personnel front and take some of that burden off his dad, maybe. I don't know. And then and Justin Zanuck would probably concentrate more on the day-to-day minutia with the agents and the office stuff and all that kind of thing. And but they'll all be in the room. They'll all have a say. Again, don't know who the final voice is. I'm guessing it's Ryan Smith on the advice of Danny Ainge. That's just my guess, because that would make sense to me that the owner is listening to the guy who's been there, done that, as a player, coach, GM, everything. So, and he obviously implicitly respects and listens to Danny. And now Austin will be another voice in the room that will be able to lend some perspective and help them try to get back on track for what they're trying to build.
So what we have here is something that is rather unique in the ecosystem of NBA basketball, where a team for 3 years has stumbled through what I articulate as a very awkward rebuild with some decisions I think are very questionable, and the jury's still out on most, if not all of them, probably outside of Lowry and Walker. I don't know if Keontae George even makes Oklahoma City's roster, or Isaiah Collier, to be honest. So we have a team that has not won at all, and we have a future that's very murky based off the lack of talent on the roster. But what we have is a front office and a coaching staff that now appears to be locked in for a number of years, which you don't see when there's no data to indicate these people are good at what they do. And I'm not saying they are or they are not. I want to be clear. But what are your thoughts on the decision to let's go ahead and lock in our coach, let's go ahead and lock in our front office, when the results, which is what this business is and what it always will be, have been mixed at best?
Yeah, well, part of it is, Spence, is that teams always talk about trying to get some level of continuity. So they're trying to build something that has some sustainability but also has some natural flow to it. And the only way you can do that is when you have people in place that you believe know what they're doing, that can make some good decisions, and you don't shake the tree, and you don't change things up when you hit a bump in the road. And I think that's what they're trying to do. Now, you're right. They've been 3 years into this tear down, whatever they want to call it. Haven't made any headway. The last 2 years, they've been the worst defensive team in the league by all metrics. Hasn't gotten any better. But we've also talked, Spence, about the idea that when you do these kind of things, there's a certain percentage of the moves you make that you control, that you make decisions on. You have the 10th pick in the draft last year, and so when your turn comes up, you make a decision about, you're taking Cody Williams or you're taking this guy or the other guy or whatever, and you decide on this guy, and then you have to live with that, and the guy does well, develops, doesn't, whatever that is. You're living with those things. But then there's a certain percentage of this process that is beyond your control. It's stuff that either falls in your lap, like a trade opportunity, whether it's something like, Phoenix wants to get rid of Kevin Durant, say, or Giannis decides for whatever reason he wants out of Milwaukee and he's decided, I'd like to go live in Salt Lake City, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that falls in your lap, and you have to have the ability to respond to make something happen, like having draft picks or having players that the other team wants or whatever. And so that's something that can happen to you. And then the other part of it is the equation that we just saw a few weeks ago that went against the Jazz, which is you have to be lucky when you do something like lose all year long in the hopes of getting a number one draft pick at a 14% chance, and it doesn't fall your way, and it goes the opposite way, and instead of getting 1, you get 5. So that's something you can't control. And when you're relying on that and you're putting some of your eggs in that basket and it doesn't work, now you're scrambling. And so that's what they're going to do. They're going to get a good player at 5 if they keep 5, and there's all kinds of scenarios they could get into and trying to move up or even move back or try to parlay it into a couple of players if they like a couple different guys or what have you, and all those kind of things that we'll be talking about in the next few weeks heading up to draft day. But that's the stuff that you have to be able to deal with, and you have to understand that some of the things you can control, and then some of the things you have to just wait for the bus to come by, and you hope it's the right bus. And if it's not going down the road you want to go down, then you got to just keep sitting on the bus stop and waiting for the next bus. And as we've said before, Spence, there's no time frame on that. You can't say you have a 5-year plan. You can't say you have a 6-year plan, because you have no idea what's going to come around the corner next week that might change your fortunes. And so what you're trying to do, you're always trying to improve your situation and improve your group in the way that you think is going to make sense. And some of that you control by taking your draft picks, which we know the guys they've taken the last few years, and have opinions about those guys, and then stuff that you can't control, like not getting Cooper Flagg and having to go to plan B. So that's all part of that process, and that's why it's interesting, really, I think, to be, if you're an NBA fan or a Jazz fan, just to, remove yourself from your fandom in terms of rooting and wanting your team to go 82-0 every year, to look and see, wow, this is going to be interesting and really can be fascinating to see what happens in the coming weeks and months, because I think there's a chance that a lot of things could change and be different between now and the start of training camp at the end of September.
We should also reference that Austin, while in Boston, that rhymed, I didn't mean to do that, worked with Will Hardy, who was an assistant coach for Ime Udoka with the Boston Celtics. So there are synergies there as well. I wanted to ask you this, though, Smitty, because you had a front row seat and still have a front row seat to a father-son combo that originally built the best teams we had here with Frank and Scott. So, Frank was the coach. He also had a lot of say in player personnel decisions. Then Scotty was the general manager eventually. And, of course, you draft John and Carl. You got something special. You make trades for Hornacek and a bunch of other moves that Scott made. Clearly did a good job here. What did you witness with the dynamic of that father-son combo? What made it so successful early on running the Jazz?
Well, one of the things that people will tell you who had the opportunity in the 80s and 90s to work under Frank Layden and his leadership as the general manager, then the head coach, and then the president of the team during the 90s, is that Frank was great at getting people in position to do certain responsibilities and then allowing them to do their job. You've heard the often quoted phrase from Bill Belichick, the great Patriots coach, who would say, just do your job, right? And Frank was great about hiring people and then letting them do their job. He was the ultimate macro manager in that he stood back, and if you were the PR person, he let you handle the PR stuff. And if you were the marketing guy, you did the marketing. If you were the physical trainer guy or the head trainer, he let you, do your job. And that's why everybody, Frank is so beloved by everybody who worked for him all those years, because they all felt that he honored them and what they were trying to do for the organization by giving them the ability to make decisions and do what they thought was best. And, none of us are perfect, and we all make mistakes. But when you have the top person relying on you and letting you make decisions and letting you, run your show, so to speak, you get all kinds of ownership from people, and you get all kinds of support because everybody wants to rally behind you, especially in the tough times, because they go, no, that's my guy. He supports me. I support him. Jerry Sloan was the same way. I remember, more than a few times would be in a practice, and at the end of practice, Jerry would say, "Okay, we have a community event tomorrow at 3, and so make sure you remember that. We're going to do something downtown for some charity or whatever." And obviously there'd be always some kind of player pushback, or do I have to show up? I have to do this, and he goes, well, I don't know. That's Patty Bally was our longtime community relations person. He'd go, Patty, what's the thing tomorrow? Well, we're doing this or whatever, and guys would want to complain or something, and he would go, hey, Patty told you what the deal is. That's the deal. It's not a big deal. We just do what we're asked to do, and then we move on. And so someone like that, Patty Bally, would have all the support and respect to Jerry Sloan, because she knew that he had her back when they had to, when she had to do something. And Frank was the same way. And that's how you build from internally a sustainable organization, because you have people working with you and for you who all feel like they are part of the process, that they are valued in what they do every day. That's how you get people to work late, right? To stay after hours, to work on weekends, to work on holidays, to be away from their families or whatever, because they they have a feeling that they're doing something and having some input for the greater good of the entire organization. And that's how the Jazz built what they had, along with the support of the Millers as the owners all those years in that kind of an atmosphere. And but what makes it ultimately tick, Spence, really, when you get down to it, is you have to have players.
Mm-hmm.
And the
period.
Players,
End of story.
And the players have to have success.
Yeah. And
when the players have success and you're competitive year after year, all that stuff trickles down, and let me tell you, it makes it a lot easier to go to work every day if that's the atmosphere around your building, day in and day out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, before we catch a break, Chris Finch, after the T-Wolves lost, during his post-game presser, he said something along the lines, there are 13 teams in the West next year that all think they have a shot for home court advantage. And I went, all right, well, he's leaving the Jazz off the list, and he's leaving probably the Blazers off the list, right? San Antonio will probably think they've got a shot with Wembanyama healthy and another pick. So it's clear that it's no secret. It's no secret to them down who's running we all know what the score is. We all know what the deal is. We all know what they did a year ago to manipulate lineups to lose intentionally for more bites of the apple. Didn't work. So before we catch a break, I don't know if the Austin hire indicates a different direction. We'll have to wait and see what this hierarchy looks like, whose voice is the loudest. What's the approach this year? Or is it very similar to what they did last year based off they've got a top 8 protected pick.
Mm-hmm.
It goes to OKC. And you can't lose that asset. Not at this point in your process, Smitty. You have to do everything you can to hold on to that pick.
Yeah.
So what do you think this year looks like?
Well, it's gonna depend, Spence, on what happens between now and training camp. And there's a lot of things that could happen. In a worst case Jazz scenario, they end up taking their picks that they have. They have 4 draft picks in the upcoming draft. They're picking 5 and 21 in the first round, and then they're picking 43 and 53 in the second round. So they have a potential to add 4 more young players. I don't think that will happen, but that's what's on the books at the moment. If they don't do anything, then they'll be trying to get something happening in free agency in the summer. They'll try and get something going in the trade market with somebody somewhere. something crops up during the summertime. Those are the things that you just don't know about. That's what we've been talking about all along, is the idea that they're hoarding all these draft picks and have all these so-called assets just in case something comes up. Like, what's the something? I don't know. Phoenix wants to get rid of Devin Booker in his prime to start over, as an example. Giannis, the Giannis thing, whatever. I don't know if that's going to really be a thing, but something like those types of things where the Jazz can at least get in the conversation. Does it happen? Who knows? But those are all the things that they're positioning themselves to at least, get in the room or get on a telephone and talk to somebody about something, because when you get to September and you get into training camp and you going through your preseason games and getting ready for the season in the middle of October, if things are pretty much the same as they are now and you've added a few draft picks from this upcoming draft and you've got the same players, and then you've got guys like Collins and Sexton and Clarkson, who are all going to be on the last years of their deals. So are you going to be trying to trade them to some team that wants an expiring contract? Do you hold on to those because you think you can make a big splash next summer in the free agent market? And then you're going to use this next season as another tank season? Can you do that and incur the wrath of your fans who want to know, well, why is this year going to be different than last year? Why do you think we're going to have a different outcome? And all of that. And that's going to be difficult to deal with and very painful if that's what is happening in December and January. And, the Jazz don't want that. The Jazz want to put together this summer a whole different team and move some guys around and bring in 2 all-stars and get a draft pick like a Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert that hits and right out of the box, and all of a sudden they're an exciting new team and whatever. That's what they're hoping for. But again, they can control some of that, and some of that they can't control, and they have to hope that something comes their way. That's what's going to make this next several months, I think, very intriguing if you're a Jazz observer or a Jazz fan wondering what's going to happen for next year.
All right, we'll catch a break. And coming up on the other side, the NBA Finals start on Thursday, so we should give some flowers, as the kids would say, to the team still playing basketball. So we'll do that. And then we'll talk about the Western Conference in the NBA and kind of try to figure out where the Jazz can fit in. As Chris Finch pointed out, 13 really talented rosters reside in the West next year. So we'll see how it goes. But Richard Smith, live in studio for another big segment, and then we'll let you hear from Austin Ainge, who addressed the media earlier. A lot to do, about 2 hours left in the program on this beautiful, gorgeous Monday afternoon. Keep it right here on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. We got Smitty for another big segment here, and then we're going to play you some comments made by Austin Ainge earlier. Austin has been hired by the Jazz as a new president of basketball operations. Our friend Sarah Todd, friend of the program, a couple of tidbits real quick. Austin was asked about his philosophy on tanking, manipulating minutes to improve lottery odds. His answer was, quote, "You will not see that this year." Ryan Smith has said that Austin Ainge will have final say and will give recommendations to him. So, Smitty, we'll hear the comments later. You and I have been on air, so we couldn't hear them live. Austin is saying tanking is off the table next year. And Ryan himself is saying Austin Ainge is now calling the shots to build this roster. What are your thoughts?
So, well, one knee-jerk reaction would be if he made the statement and used the phrase tanking is off the table, if that was accurate or however he phrased it.
Says, quote, "You will not see that this year." That's what he said. Yeah.
So that to me means there's some admission that that's what they were doing, even though they've never said that. And obviously it was all under the guise of player development and trying to figure out, which I see some of. I can't get on board with the whole thing because, as we've talked about before, Spence, that's why you have a G League team. You have a G League team to get guys 40 minutes a night and get them used to playing an NBA game and all that. And they're going to say that, well, it's best if they're doing it against NBA guys, which I understand some of that. But, again, you've got fans to consider and people who are paying money and sponsors and all that kind of stuff. But, anyway, if that's what he's saying, if that's the intent, then it's going to be interesting. That would even lean more into our comments in the previous segment about the Jazz then really wanting to or needing to get in a lot of action this summer with free agents or with trades or something to reinvent the group they have, because the group they have right now, even if those guys are playing, those guys are going to win. Maybe they win 30 games, 34 games, something, whatever. And if that is what you think or you believe, that's a worst case scenario. That's the worst place to be, because you never, Spence, want to be in the gray area in the middle of the league, because you don't get anywhere. You're picking 14, 15, 16, whatever, and so you want to be one of the top 5 teams who has a legitimate chance to do something like Indiana, OKC are still doing, or you want to be one of the bottom 5 teams like the Jazz were this year and have a chance at the top lottery prize, which they didn't get. Next year's draft is going to be, by most people's evaluations, is going to be a very good draft also. And so if that's the case as well, a year from now, the Jazz would have another opportunity at a good prospect and a good talent. But, if Austin Ainge is saying that's off the table, that's not what we're going to do, then that's going to be interesting, because that would mean to me then we're going to see a lot of stuff happening, or at least attempting to happen in the coming months, because you can talk all you want about signing free agents, and and we beat to death the famous Danny Ainge quote of big game hunting and all that. But that's what you're doing all the time, Spence. And sometimes you don't get the big game, and sometimes you come home and you don't have anything on the hood of the car because you didn't get anything, and when you went hunting, and so you can try all those things, but you have to be able to get something done. That's going to be the trick for the Jazz, because if they're not going to do this other thing, which I can understand that, Austin Ainge is, I don't think he's coming in to say, yeah, we're gonna try and lose and take another swing at that thing again next year. I don't think he could say anything different. He wants to come in and give people hope that, I'm here to help us get better and improve and help us, come along with us, and we're going to get this done and whatever. That's what part of what his job is.
Here's another quote from Ryan Smith when asked about Austin. And this is Andy Larson's Twitter profile, quote, "Austin will be running the program. He's got final recommendation to myself on any decisions that need to be made. I think it's the job of Justin, Danny, and myself to plug into him. So that is Ryan still saying that he's making final decisions. So he's saying Austin will be running the program, but the way he's characterized it is he's got final recommendation to myself on any decisions.
Well, if that's the case, then I'd be interested to hear how where Danny Ainge fits in all this,
yep.
and whether Danny is this a precursor to Danny, getting one foot out the door, and is Danny on the verge of saying, hey, Austin can take it from here, and I originally retired 5 years ago or 6 years ago, whatever it was, from the Celtics. And that was my intent. And then Ryan Smith talked me, back into coming back in and helping the Jazz. And I've done that. But we put this new person in, just happens to be my son. And he's in a position of authority within the basketball operations. And so does that mean Danny's going to have a lesser profile going forward? And does that mean that he's going to have less and less involvement? If that's the case, that would be interesting for me to hear something in that regard.
Good point. Here's a Will Hardy quote on Austin Ainge. Quote, during my time with the Celtics, I really enjoyed working alongside Austin and was able to gain a great appreciation for his basketball insight and acumen. Having Austin help guide our group as we continue to grow is huge for our program. Are you surprised we haven't heard anything from Daniel? From Danny himself?
Well, again, I don't know. It'll be interesting, Spence, how, if that comes out in the coming weeks or months.
Or maybe he's just finding out about this today.
That part, come on, I can't put any credence into any of that. That doesn't make any sense to me. But, be that as it may, if that's what Ryan Smith is saying, if that's what Will Hardy is saying, it'll be interesting to hear from the CEO, who has had the final say, or at least was the point man up to this point. And is that in the offing of changing, after the dust settles, after the draft and free agency? And does Danny, in August say, hey guys, it's been fun, I'll see you around? The George Harrison quote, hey guys, it's been fun, I'll see you around the clubs. When he quit the Beatles, walked out, so I don't know. I'm not saying anything bad. I don't know anything about that. It's just, it is interesting that if Danny's been the guy, and now other people, the owner and the head coach, alluding or making direct comments to Austin Ainge is now the guy, then that just brings up the question that I would have, like, and so what happened to the other guy? What is the deal with the guy who was the guy? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's that'll be interesting to hear how that plays out.
I wonder if the George Harrison in this dynamic is their current general manager, who also has not been prominently featured in many of these press releases. Because I don't know how this is going to work. I really don't. Yeah. And Zanuck at one point was thought to be the next general manager of Milwaukee. Before that went to Horst, I think. And Zanuck is a very well-respected person across the landscape of basketball on all levels of ecosystems as a former agent. He could probably get another job if he wanted one. Maybe he just likes living here. And again, we all want to stay employed. So you're not going to hear anybody say anything out of turn. That's why I always remind listeners, you listen to these press conferences, and then you actually try to dig in to translate what they're saying, because they rarely give you the truth when they're talking to the public or talking to the media. You referenced the Danny Ainge big game hunting, then it was Drew Eubanks and Patty Mills, and everybody's like, wait, what? And so it's Austin today saying we will not be tanking next year. But if we play that tape forward, Smitty, and if we look at who the Jazz have on their roster, and we don't know what the roster will look like in the fall, I'm going to go out on a limb and say John Collins picks up that $30 million option. That's my best guess.
Wow.
Hot take today.
Really, okay.
Stephen A. Smith on the program. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Collins. Now, if he doesn't, but he's going to, if he doesn't, they'll have some money to work with. But if he does, which he will, they will not have cap space, believe it or not. Even though the books moving forward are clean, most of the expirings like John and JC and everybody, that's next offseason.
Yep.
So they don't have a ton of avenues to add to the group. They'll have the draft picks, as you referenced, and then we know the group as it is. But if we go off what Chris Finch said, and I don't think he's wrong, that there are 13 rosters in the West that are good and young and developed. If we play the tape forward and we take Austin at his word, and they're going to put best foot forward and try to win this year, and they win like 32 games and get the 9th pick, and that goes to Oklahoma City, that's a massive step in the wrong direction, Smitty. It just is.
Yeah, well, and again, Spence, they're going to have the guys you just mentioned, the so-called veterans, Sexton and Clarkson and Collins, are all on have 1 year left on their deals coming up this next season. So those are, in NBA parlance, referred to as expiring deals that a lot of teams are interested in because they feel like maybe a player in that situation can help them in the short term without that team making any kind of commitment past that current season.
Sure, yeah.
And so those might be guys who, might start the year on the Jazz, but then the Jazz find a home for them somewhere else where they can get either another player that they like or some other draft assets. You don't know, again, how that would play out. A lot of teams, people forget, but a lot of teams are over the salary cap, and if you're over the salary cap into luxury tax, then you become then you have to have all these mathematicians and these numbers guys who tell you who you can trade and who you can't trade, because you can't trade John Collins to a team that's in the luxury tax and take back 2 first-round picks because they're taking in $26 million in that scenario that they can't take on because they're in the tax. So you have to trade $26 million for $26 million. So you have to have some kind of balance there. And so a lot of those trades that you'd like to do, you can't do just because the rules don't let you do it. So a lot of those things you get hampered by. So it's not an enviable position to be in, other than the Jazz have a lot of flexibility to do a lot of different things, but you have to be able to get those things done. Part of me also says, and again, I don't know what their final iteration and setup is going to be, but I would think, looking at most teams and how they operate, and the guys I know around the league who are still in front offices and in those kinds of positions, and not to take anything away from him, because I'm an Austin Ainge fan, and I really like him, and I know he works very hard. But you're taking a call from Austin Ainge, or you're taking a call from Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge has a track record, and Danny Ainge has more clout and more oomph, and so you're more likely to take a call from him in terms of trying to discuss something or whatever. Now, maybe Danny's still going to be doing that. We don't know. Maybe he's the guy who makes those kind of phone calls. I don't know that. Maybe that stuff is going to be turned over to Austin if Ryan Smith is accurate, or if that's the way they're setting it up for Austin to be the final guy. Then that's the thing that's intriguing to me at the moment is where Danny is in all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would be very curious because Danny, I do not believe, was made available during this presser. I'm not seeing quotes spill in from him. Looking at the beat writers covering it, we will play a portion of this press conference coming up in a little bit. Look, man, like Oklahoma City, there's a stat that just flashed on ESPN. They're the youngest team as far as average age to play in the NBA Finals since 1955. Their average age is 24.7 years old. And I could go down the list. You know the deal. The West is a bear. It is tough. I just don't know what's a realistic expectation. If the new guy in charge is Austin Ainge, and he is telling the community today, last year's approach is nothing we're interested in this year, and you add 2 first-round picks to this roster, and maybe you find a guy in the second round you think you can play for you, and those are your offseason maneuvers, because to the points that we've been talking about, there just aren't a lot of other avenues this offseason for them to get something done. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's hard for me to see. based off the real game changers that may leave their teams, and I'm talking Giannis and Durant, and maybe New York does something with Cat. Maybe Boston's new ownership says, I'm not interested in writing a $500 million check just to have the roster. Jalen, like, none of those players will agree to be traded to the Jazz to play for the Utah Jazz based off of where they're at right now. The reason you guys were able to trade for Mike Conley is you had a ready-made team that was ready to win. Mike looked at your group and said, yeah, I'll go join Mitchell and Gobert, and I'll be coached by Quinn. That's a good team. You've got to build up a good team before any vet is going to look at your group and say, yeah, I'm going to join them. What's, generally speaking, your thoughts on what this could look like if this is your group with some other rookies added to it and they try to put their best foot forward and compete in a Western Conference that is just stacked right now?
Yeah, well, it's a very daunting task. You're going to have your young guys really develop and really, make turn a corner in what they've been able to do so far in the NBA. Keontae George, for example, if he's going to be getting minutes next year, he's got to figure out how to play some defense. He plays no defense right now, but he's got to get better at that. The Collier kid, he has to learn how to make some shots from the outside. He has to show improvement in that area. Those two guys, Filipowski, I think can be a rotation guy for a decent team because he's a little bit, you can move him around a little bit, have some flexibility with him. Hendricks, we still don't know because he had the terrible tragedy with the broken leg, and so the jury's out on him. Cody Williams, I don't know what his deal is. I'm not sure he's even an NBA player. That's just my personal opinion. But it's interesting that they're gonna have to rely on several of these guys to turn a corner in terms of their development to show that they can improve and be part of a winning effort going forward. We know Markkanen can be that. We know that. We know Kessler can be a standard bearer in the middle, to be a rim protector, to be a shot blocking threat, to be a rebounder in traffic. We know he can do those things. But again, having said those things, Spence, I don't think any of those guys are protected or are untouchable because you're trying to build a team that wasn't very good the last couple years, and no matter what improvements guys make, they have to really show that they can be contributing members of a winning effort and a positive growth spurt in terms of how they play. Is that going to take place this next year? Are they going to add some other guys to the mix that are going to help them? That's a tall task. That's a lot to ask. And you're talking about OKC, Spence. When you look at it, OKC is going to be interesting because they're not only set up right now to be successful in the present and for the long term going forward, but they also should have had a whole different team in place still because they had this set up, Spence, over a decade ago when they drafted in successive drafts Kevin Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook. They hit on 3 draft picks, boom, boom, boom. They went to the 2012 NBA Finals. They should still be together, really, when you think about it. They should still be running the show in Oklahoma City, but what happens? You get a taste of a success, and all of a sudden money and egos get in the way. And now none of those guys are there. They're long gone. Their history. Oklahoma City brought in Paul George. That didn't work. He begged his way out, forced his way out. Sam Presti, who's one of the smartest GMs going, he said, hey, the guy doesn't want to be here. I don't want him here if he doesn't want to be here. And so he moved him to the Clippers. He wanted to go to the Lakers. He moved him to the Clippers. He got Gilgeous-Alexander after his rookie year. He's a nice player, but he wasn't that player until he got to OKC. And Sam, I think, would be one of the first guys to tell you, well, we thought he'd be a nice player, and he was part of the deal, and because we were kind of forced into doing a deal, and we got lucky. okay? So we're going to say that 30% of it was us being smart and 70% of it was us being lucky, okay? And that's the deal. Sacramento drafted De'Aaron Fox. 3 years later, they draft Tyrese Halliburton. Now they've got two very good point guards on their roster, and they're trying to figure out what do we do with these two guys. And what happens, Spence, we fast forward to today, they don't have either one of them is in Sacramento. They've gotten rid of both of them, right? And so the point being that you can have these grand plans and you can have this thing laid out to what you want to do. It doesn't always work the way you want it to. You have to be able to shuck and jive and be able to make adjustments as you go to build your group. Sam Presti has done a great job, not only in building his group, but in the fact that he has been able to not only develop guys, but he's been able to draft the right guys for how they're playing, and they're really a testament to how you can build a team if you're smart and diligent and kind of have your head about you.
All right, before I set you loose, because we ran out of time, this is just going to be really fascinating to watch play out. I am of the opinion, based off of the fact that there's a top 8 protected pick in the draft next year, you need that asset. You have to, and look, I know that the whole losing intentionally and manipulating lineups is a really difficult thing for a fan base to ask for, or to ask from your fan base. And I have legitimate questions about, because the culture thing, I mean, it's real. You want to build a culture in sports and business and life. I know it's real. But can you build a culture while you're unserious about competing? I have real serious questions about that. So it's a juxtaposition. It's an interesting paradox that they're faced with.
Yeah.
Because I do think you need that asset next year. I think you need that pick next year. And I think you need to put yourself in a similar position that you were in this year to at least have chances. But you're also spinning your wheels if you're unserious about competing when you're trying to build culture, right? So from the perspective of the Isaiah Colliers and Keontae Georges and Cody Williams and Bryce Sensabaughs and Taylor Hendricks, like the grip of Filipowski's, the grip of young players they have on their roster. What are you hoping for this offseason for them to come into training camp in the fall to indicate that they are ready to develop in a way that, quite frankly, I just haven't seen so far?
Well, you're spot on about the culture thing, because what's interesting, Spence, is at the professional level, it's very difficult to build a culture when everyone in the room is accepting the idea that we're not really serious about winning. That is a difficult thing, because what happens is you start building those habits about not winning, and that the guys next to me are okay with that. And who else? Oh, my bosses seem to be okay with that. And that is a tough deal, because when you get, if you turn the corner and you get better and you are in a position to challenge for playoff positioning or playoff seeding or whatever it is, as a competitive, serious team, you have to learn how to do that, and you have to learn how to break through the wall to be able to have a level of success. And it's hard to learn how to and know how to do that if you haven't done it to that point in time. And, we see that, I heard that from some of the New York Knicks players, after the series with the Pacers, that, making progress, but we're, learning these steps about what we have to do to get better. And these are all-star level competitive guys in the middle of their careers, right? And so you're asking a young group that hasn't won to all of a sudden have that kind of approach and culture. It is a difficult thing. You really have to get, at some point, be able to lay on your group and to be able to say, we expect this kind of production. If we're not getting it, then we're moving on to the next guy. That's what made Jerry Sloan such a great player. Hey, the Jazz had great players. Okay, that's step one. Whether you have Stockton Malone, whether you add Hornacek, you draft a Brian Russell in the second round, you get a Greg Ostertag, a serviceable big guy, rim protector at the end of the first round, whatever it is. You get Darren Williams with a top pick, whatever. You have to get guys, but then they have to create the culture of winning based on the fact that we're not accepting less than that. And to this point, the Jazz seem to be accepting that this is their lot to be down at the bottom, and we're not worried about the winning. That scares me because that's something that is hard to manufacture and fabricate, without going through the hard work of doing it. So this summer is going to be big for the Jazz young guys. It's going to be interesting to see how they come back in the fall. How many of them are still on the roster? That's going to be an interesting thing. Because if Austin Ainge is true to his word about we're not doing that again, then I would think that there's got to be a lot of changing and a lot of different dynamics that go on between now and next October.
Oh, dear. Well, we'll have to see. I continue to remind our listeners we just were so spoiled for so long with just incremental, quote-unquote, rebuilds, 2 to 3 years. Then, boom, we're back to having a good team here. And when you look across the landscape of the NBA, there are plenty of cities and plenty of organizations that have found themselves in a perpetual state of where the Jazz are now.
Yeah.
Decades, not 3, 4, 5 years. Charlotte, I think it's been 21 years since they won a playoff series. I don't remember Washington had a little something with Beal and Wall for a second, but I don't know, man. It's
in Sacramento.
Sacramento.
And that, to me, that's an owner thing. They had a little blip a couple of years ago. They had a good young team. They had a coach of the year, Mike Brown. Then they fired him.
Yeah.
Then they fired the general manager.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All within a 12-month period. Like you can't do things like that and expect that you're going to get continued traction. You have to believe in what the courses you've laid out, and then you have to be willing to take the hard knocks to go along. And maybe that's the Jazz are adding a guy like Austin Ainge to their group, and maybe that's the next step in the progression that they're looking for.
Would help if you had players, but
you got to have play. That's always the thing. You have to have players. I remind people all the time. Pat Riley said a great thing when we were playing in the Lakers in the '80s and in a playoff series, and they asked him about all these different things they were doing scouting wise, and he finally looked at the reporter and said, "Well, I don't know if we have any advantage that way. I think our advantage is that we have Kareem and Magic."
Yeah.
If you have Kareem and Magic, I
be okay.
I think that's a good place to start. Okay.
For sure. Smitty, great to see you as always. Thanks for the time, and we'll chat soon, all right?
All right, Spence. Thanks, man.
The great Richard Smith. All right, Austin Ainge addressed the media about an hour ago. We will bring those comments to you coming up on the other side. Then we'll get into the 5 o'clock hour of the program before we say goodnight at 6 on a Monday afternoon right here on ESPN 700. All right, we'll launch into the final hour of the program coming up in just a bit. NBA Finals begin on Thursday. The battle for Lord Stanley's Cup will begin on Wednesday. But big news, kind of unexpected news here in the market. Austin Ainge has been hired as the new president of basketball operations for the Utah Jazz. Austin just wrapped up his comments from earlier, so in case you didn't have a chance, here it is, Austin Ainge, the new president of basketball operations for the Utah Jazz.
Excited to announce that Austin Ainge will be the new president of Utah Jazz basketball operations. We will open with remarks from Governor Ryan Smith and then turn the time over to Austin before we open up for questions. Ryan?
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. Today's a great day for Utah Jazz basketball. It's an awesome opportunity to welcome Austin Ainge as our president of basketball operations. We've had this role open for some time, and we've been very methodical about it. And we're super excited that Austin and his family made the decision to come to Utah. Another bright, brilliant executive that we're bringing to the state and run our basketball program. So we couldn't be more excited. Ashley, myself, our group, in having him run basketball for the Utah Jazz, and specifically not anyone else. So we're excited to have you here. I think before I kick it over to Austin, I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions around organizational structure and design, and what I've learned in business and also in the NBA, that every organization's set up a little different. For us, Austin will be running the program. He's got final recommendation to myself on any decisions that need to be made. I think it's the job of both Justin, Danny, and myself to kind of plug into him. And so hopefully that alleviates quite a few questions of who kind of has the final decision on roster and management and personnel. His resume speaks for himself, for 17 years, kind of growing up, either playing hoops, scouting, coaching, and particularly on roster management. I think it couldn't have come at a better time for where we're at as an organization. And we're just thrilled. I'm super excited that he's chosen to come back here after playing in Utah for 4 years. And we're super lucky to have you. So excited to get to work, man.
Thanks. I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Ryan. I wanted to kind of explain why I chose to do this, why I'm so excited about this opportunity. First thing is people. Ryan and Ashley, their passion, their leadership, their energy, their drive, they really, really want to do this right. And I couldn't think of better people to partner with. So, and then the management of the team and the coaching staff of the team. I used to share a wall with Will in Boston. We'd known each other for a number of years and talked a lot of basketball. I'm a big believer in Will. Justin, I've known since 2009. Very excited to work with him and lean on him and learn from him. My father and I worked together for 14 years and had a lot of fun and a lot of success. I'd love to try to duplicate
I take that success right now.
Yeah. And there's a whole great group of management people here. Some of them are right here with us. A lot of people I've known since they were 19, Avery Bradley and others. Anyway, there are a lot of great people. The next thing is the state, and specifically the fans. The passion here, it's not common. It's not everywhere in this NBA. And that passion is so infectious, and it pushes a team, it pushes a franchise, it holds us accountable. It puts pressure, good pressure to succeed, and that was a huge draw for me. And then lastly, the situation of the team. We have a ton of optionality, a lot of future picks, a lot of things we can do. It's going to take a lot of work, but I can't wait to get started.
We have 2 microphones. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand, and then also please announce your name and outlet so Austin can get to know you.
Ryan Miller, KSL.com. Austin, you're coming in the middle of a rebuild. Kind of how do you approach that on how they've done things in the past and how versus how you want to do things in the future?
Well, I'm learning a little bit how they did things in the past, but and I'll just try to add what I can. But it's really There's a lot of ways you can execute it, but mostly it's just making a lot of good decisions over and over and over, right? 2 ways: second round picks, first round picks, trades, free agency. It's just making good decisions, stacking up good players, so you have more to work with. That's really the job. And so whether you're in the middle, the beginning, or the end of building a team, that's what you're doing every day, trying to make good decisions. And so that's what we'll try to do.
Dana Green with ABC4. Ryan just said you're going to have final say in personnel decisions, but how will you consult Justin and your father about making those decisions? And then maybe just discuss the dynamic you have with Danny and how you've worked together and what that dynamic is like.
Yeah, I mean, I plan on including DA, Justin, Will, and lots of people here, everyone. Like, this is a team sport. Both downstairs and upstairs, right? This is a team thing. Ryan will be super involved in everything, of course. We're going to have millions of conversations and argue and fight and research and work and watch and then get in a room and figure it out. And that's really how it works in all these organizations. And I mean, specifically with my father, we've been doing this since I, a kid, even, working together or separate teams, or before either of us were working with teams, talking about players, talking about ball. That's life, that's fun.
Ben Anderson, KSL Sports. Do you have, Austin, like an approach to how to build teams in the NBA of what you think is winning right now, where the league is headed, and how attainable that is?
Well, I can't tell you all the secrets. No, I mean, I really believe that it is kind of a boring answer, but I really believe it's just stacking good decisions, one on top of the other. And, a lot of times people see the big trade or the, big move, that big free agent signing or something as the end, but really that requires lots of diligent management to build up to that point. Right, and so it's just about stacking good decisions together, and that's what we're going to try to do.
Ryan Miller, KSL.com. What was the process like of getting this job? When did you first contact each other? Kind of just take us through that whole thing.
Brian, do you want to do that one? Or do you want me to do it?
We can both do it. Why don't you start?
I got a text from Ryan. It said, "Hey, call me," or "Hey, I got a question, can you call me?" And actually I was in a meeting with new Celtics ownership for 2 hours planning their entire offseason. And I got a text, so I couldn't respond for a while. When I got out, I called him. It was kind of an interesting conversation. I'll maybe let you take it from there.
Yeah, I think for me, it's something that we had always thought about within the organization with this role. When Danny came in, he was very clear that he did not want to be the president of basketball operations, and that's the role that he had. He wanted to be able to choose his spots at this phase of his career, but still had a lot to offer and value. And Danny can play business with us till he's 85, and Michelle doesn't want him in the house anymore, whatever it is. And when you have a Hall of Famer that's around, whether it's last week watching him post up Cody Williams down there, or whatever it is where he wants to go, I've always kind of wanted to get him in that role. And I would say that over the last 2 years, I think Justin and Danny have operated probably about as lean as any team in the organization and in the NBA, just with their roles and how they did it. So it'd been something that had been on my mind, but really it came to a conversation with me and Ashley and some of the folks in our group, and said, who would you go get? What would you do? And I kept coming back to Austin. The challenge is I had no clue how Austin felt. And, they've been in a pretty epic championship window. It's clear where his role was and what he meant to that organization. It was also very clear that not only at the beginning of last year, but this summer, his name was starting to float around in a lot of these other opportunities to run teams. And, kind of had a pit in my stomach last year when I saw that, because I always had this in the back of my head. He really needed to know that I felt that way. And I don't think that he'd ever known that. So I called him and told him how I felt and how I saw this. And he called me back after that meeting and said, "I can't get this out of my head. Was this something that you would think about now? I was like, whenever you're ready. And called me back the next morning and said he was.
I kind of said, like, if we're going to do this, like, now is that I want to be a part of. These are big decisions coming up, and if this is something we want to talk about, it now feels like the right time.
So the biggest challenge for me was I had to call Danny, who was not in town, said, I hired your son. And Danny and I had built a lot of trust over the last 15 years, and I didn't know at that point whether I had completely lost all trust or he was going to say that was the right move. But, well, here we are. And so I couldn't be more excited. And then just knowing Jay-Z and how much of a team player and how great their skill sets complement each other. I think from the outside, oftentimes in the NBA, you see that, oh, someone made that trade or someone did this. I've never been part of a decision in the league where it's not a group and a team effort, just like we're trying to build on the court. And so I'm really excited. We got better. The Jazz got better with this move. And I'm really excited for it going forward. So that's kind of how it happened. Fortunately, Austin felt as good about our situation as I felt about him. And things happen quick. And so I also would be remiss if I didn't thank Brad Stevens and the Celtics, because when I called Brad, just the way he handled it, knowing that was probably not an easy call for him to receive, given where they're at and what Austin meant to that organization. He was also so excited and saying that it was the best part of his job that he gets to see this, and that it was a super smart move, and he hopes that Austin still feels as strongly about the trades with Utah as he did from this side. So
he tried to negotiate with me immediately. It was great. It was great. It was great. As DA did when he left and came here.
Yes. Yeah. Ben Anderson, KSL Sports. You mentioned big decisions coming up. Like in the next 3 weeks, you've got a top 5 pick and you can start negotiating extensions for some of the players. Is 3 weeks enough time to have intimate knowledge of like what is going on there? So, the Celtics are picking 28th or whatever it is.
Correct. Yeah.
How familiar are you with the 5th pick and then the players already on this roster?
Yeah. I mean, luckily, I've always believed, and we've always done it, where you evaluate everyone. The whole draft. It is, you never know what trades come in on the clock, and so I've definitely spent a lot of time. I interviewed most of these young players at the combine already. I've put in the time all year on these guys, so I feel prepared. But certainly we'll crunch, and I can't wait to learn from all the great people in the Jazz organization and get their input and think through it. Big decisions. There'll be trade conversations, all these things. It's a very active time of year, so we got a lot to prepare for.
David Locke, Jazz Radio. Seems as though this season may have been the first time where the new collective bargaining agreement really began to put a stamp on the league and roster building. What did you learn from watching how the first season of this new collective bargaining agreement had an impact in how you roster build now?
Yeah, that's a great question, David. It's subtle differences. It's still talent and teamwork and all the same things. I think some extensions and other contracts will be negotiated a little stronger. Bird rights used to matter a little bit more, to get a little bit into the weeds on this stuff, but I think it's a firmer cap, right? And so every dollar matters a little more. We used to care a lot about expiring contracts. We used to care a lot about holding on to players for potential trades, and really now the trades are easier, and it's more about the space and the room under the aprons. So that's the short answer.
Dana Green, ABC4. Austin, what is your perception of this current Jazz team, and how far away are they from becoming a legit playoff contender?
It's a great question. It'll just depend on how these guys develop and what other moves we make, right? It's a hard thing to predict. I think it's fair to say we got a lot of work to do.
Hi, Austin. Lauren Green, sideline reporter here at the Utah Jazz. It's nice to meet you. You mentioned the situation of the team, a ton of optionality as well in the upcoming years. What excites you about that and just being in that battle with the different people who are in this room and just in this organization?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of moves, right? When you have a a treasure trove of assets. There's a lot of things you can do, and we have young players we're excited about and see how they develop. There's a lot of different ways to go, hopefully up.
Sean O'Connell, ESPN 700. As someone correctly stated, seems like a team in a rebuild, and some things were done this past season to potentially manipulate where the team would end up in the draft lottery odds. And unfortunately, some of that is dependent on luck, and team got a little bit unlucky. So do you have a philosophy? What is your philosophy on, for lack of a better term, to be indelicate, tanking or, manipulating minutes and player performance in order to achieve better lottery odds?
We won't see that this year.
JP Chunga, UtahJazz.com. Ryan, when you look at the front office additions, Austin mentioned Avery Bradley, bringing in Danny. How have you seen the front office and the executive part add to the pool of talent that you already inherited with ownership?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime, and just like they're going to go through in Boston, anytime you kind of come in, you're starting over a little bit because you kind of sit down. It's actually a weird experience when you come in for the first time and take over, because you really didn't choose anyone that's there. And, fortunately for us, I mean, Jay-Z and a couple of the other folks were just true team players, and they came in and said, hey, Jay-Z was a little bit of a mentor to me as we came in, and was like, hey, I got you. Like, this is going to be crazy. We're not going to do anything rash. I mean, there's a lot of school of thoughts here. And then, when Danny was able to come in, it was just another step in that process. And this is a really big step because ultimately, this is Austin's show, and we're all part of it, and, we're truly working as a team. But if I look at Will and his contract extension, I look at where Austin's coming in, continuity is really, really important to me. And I think the one thing that Jazz fans can take away from this is we're sitting in a really good spot up top. We've got to go match that on the court.
Austin, Jeff right here, Fox 13. With your connections to Utah, having played at BYU, is this a dream job for you? And what was that first conversation with your father after you accepted the position?
This is a dream. I mean, I've worked for a lot of years to have the opportunity to lead a team, right? This is was the next evolution for me in my career. And we always, in the basketball business, we always say ownership is the most important advantage. And so be able to do this in Utah with Ryan and Ashley is very much a dream. DA and I have talked, multiple times a week forever, and he just, I can't remember, said something like, this is awesome. It's going to be so fun.
Kevin Reynolds, Salt Lake Tribune. This one's for Ryan. With how the draft lottery played out, does that change your approach to the rebuild and change your thinking on the rebuild at all, or are you guys going to stick the course?
I think Austin kind of answered that. I mean, I think, we've got smart people around the table, and they'll look at all the optionality that's in front of us. But, we're going to get a great player if we draft at 5. So I think that's kind of missed in all this, as disappointed as everyone was not to get the #1 pick. I think, maybe something that isn't talked about enough is the talent that's in this draft, and we'll be prepared.
If you look at the playoffs and look at all the best players in the NBA and how many of them went #1, it's better to have #1. But there's a lot of other stars that came from all over the draft, and certainly the Jazz have a long history of second rounders that have become all-stars, and so it's not the only way to do it.
James Peterson, ESPN 700. There's a perception, Austin, that there's certain ways you can't build a team in Utah, which I'm sure you're aware of that perception. You obviously had a lot of success building it the way you did in Boston, you and your team there. That said, how much of how you went about roster construction there do you feel like you can duplicate here in Utah?
I think it's the same, honestly. I think this is a great place, and I think you build it the right way. Like I said, stacking good decisions over and over and over. And players want hope. They want to win. They want great culture. They want great coaching. They want great teammates. So that's what we have to give them.
Dana Green, ABC4. For Ryan, can you define Justin Zanik's role with the organization now after this?
Yeah, Justin's the GM of the organization. His role hasn't changed at all. And, I actually think that if you think about the skill set that Austin has and, Jay-Z's skill set, they actually work really well. I mean, Austin came up from player coach, heavily into scouting and talent evaluation and roster construction. I think Jay-Z came up as an attorney or a lawyer into talent, much more managing players on that side, and has kind of come over to this side together. And if you look at where they meet up, and then you combine that with DA, who hopefully can pick his spots a little bit more, and have a little bit more depth there, as well as the demands on the league. I mean, we're supposed to be everywhere at once. I mean, we're supposed to be here watching our team while also tournaments are going on in the Big East and the Big 12, plus, overseas. I mean, I was just talking to Austin today about all the trips that he spent all over Europe, all over Australia, and we're all supposed to be everywhere. And so I think that, as I mentioned earlier, we got a lot better. I think the one commonality that you have between everyone is there's truly a good vibe and teamwork, and I think Will's a big piece of that, as well as the other parts of our organization, which is what I'm excited about.
I'm sorry, did I hear applause after Austin's opening comments? Were people clapping?
Correct. I think there was some sort of like a Friends of the Jazz, or maybe some sort of gallery. Unless that was Tony Jones and co.
Tony's just giving him like the Arsenio Hall.
Here we go.
I've been listening to NBA press conferences for 30 years, if not more. I don't know that I've ever heard applause after. I don't know. That was a little weird.
The Alex Jensen intro, that was like a presser in an event, stuff like that for sure. But yeah, I thought the Jazz thing was a media event. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Well, I can't help you on that.
ESPN700sports.com. If you missed any of Austin Ainge's comments or Danny Ainge's comments, Ryan Smith. Danny Ainge not available. Justin Zanik not available. Penny for Justin Zanik's thoughts is all I'm going to say. Should we catch a break before I get in trouble?
No.
Okay.
We should keep going.
But we do need to catch a break. We're late.
We do need to catch a break.
All right. 5 o'clock hour of the show on a Monday gets rolling up on the other side on ESPN 700. All right, really pumped for tonight. Game 7, Knicks Pacers, Madison Square Garden.
Woo!
Oh, wait.
In some reality.
Yeah, and you know what, man? Not like it went down. Don't lay an egg with an elimination game in front of you, where in a building we know you can win in. We've already seen it, and a team that you just have to give it to the Pacers. They were a better team. They deserve to march on. I don't know what the Knicks do because I do think it's a good group and they're signed. I think Mikel's eligible for an extension.
Yep.
I know he's taking a lot of heat, but with how desolate it's been there for so long, I think it was fun. I did not love the way they went out. I thought it was very disappointing.
No, the way they went out was ugly in the basketball. Number one, the sloppiness they played with, the comeback loss. Right, obviously it was cool they did it on the flip side against the Boston Celtics. But when you go out the way they did, it always is going to leave a bitter taste in your mouth. And for me, especially, it hurts a little more when I look at the NBA, look at the landscape of the league, and while I think that OKC is going to be here for the next decade, this was maybe the most open opportunity for a non-dynasty, a team that doesn't have this big championship window. This was maybe the best year for one of those teams to sneak in and win one that we've seen in a long time. And when do you get another opportunity where the East Coast's best team has their star go down? Where I don't want to say back into the Eastern Conference Finals, but man, without a lot of the things that went down, the Knicks aren't in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they had a real opportunity, Spence, fully healthy, 20-point lead in Game 1 of the ECF, and, now we sit here.
And, there's a reason why, after Game 1, I cracked the mic, and the first thing I said about that game was that's really hard to come back from.
Yeah.
That Game 1 loss was not a close battle where it could have gone either way. You had that so in your back pocket. And when you lose a game where it's a soul-crushing defeat, I mean, losing home court is one thing, but these two teams are both really good on the road. So I wasn't necessarily like, oh, they lost home court. I was like, wow. Because Jalen Brunson will be 85 years old, and he'll be trying to sleep one night, and he'll be like, dude, Game 1. Eastern Conference Finals, 2025.
Yeah,
that's not a loss that you shake off easily.
I think I mentioned it the night after, right? I actually mentioned it the night after the Knicks won Game 1 against the Celtics. If you recall, I said, Spence, I think we won the series based on how we beat Boston in that game, in that comeback. And I also mentioned that day Cleveland in the finals, right? You go back to 2017 actually. J.R. Smith forgets that they missed a free throw, and LeBron has a 50 whatever point triple double, and they lose because J.R. Smith just forgets times to score situation. And the way they lost that game, I thought they lost the series. Those 3 Game 1 moments to me stand out as situations where, although you never take too much stock in one of Game 7s or one of a 7-game series, those 3 situations stand out to me where I thought to my head, oh, they just lost the series, and they did.
Yep. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. So big news of the day today, Austin Ainge has been hired as the new president of basketball operations for the Utah Jazz. If you missed Austin's press conference where he received a standing ovation after his intro, you can go to ESPN700sports.com. Stanley Cup Finals begins on Wednesday. NBA Finals begin on Thursday, and we are your home for both of those events in the market here on ESPN 700. All right, Porter, what comes our way on a Tuesday edition of the radio show?
On a Tuesday edition of The Drive, we will, of course, recap the Austin Ainge presser, the debut of the new Jazz president of basketball operations, and talk some NBA Finals with Tim McMahon for the NBA Daily Assist. On the Jazz side, Sarah Todd stops by the program. Fresh off a good old long sabbatical, Dave Fox stops by on a Tuesday, and talking some RSL as well, as that's been not great.
Oof. Not great, Bob. Not great. Hopefully they can turn it around. All right. We'll say goodnight. Special thank you today, Kyle Bonagura, Tom Haberstroh and the great Richard Smith. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show today, ESPN 700sports.com is your home for that. Also, download our mobile app. Take us on the go. It's how I listen to our station. ESPN 700 app is available. App Store, Google Play Store for free. And then for what we do in our space, specifically for 4 hours every afternoon, it's all up digitally for your consumption and disposal with our podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars. It helps. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Monday evening. We'll talk to you on a Tuesday edition of The Drive. And as always, you can find it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.